Sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unexpected places. For 58-year-old Beau Thatcher, that place was a dusty livestock auction in Calico Ridge, where a young orphan girl stood alone on the platform. Her name was Lottie, and she had nothing but a tattered teddy bear and eyes that had seen too much loss. On an impulse Beau couldn't explain, he bid on her guardianship and brought her home to his ranch. The wealthy cowboy thought he was simply doing a good deed, but as days turned to weeks, this quiet, resilient child began breaking down walls he'd built around his heart for 20 years. She was forcing him to face memories he'd buried deep, a son he'd lost, a wife he'd driven away. Could this forgotten orphan become the second chance neither of them knew they needed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun hadn't yet crested the eastern peaks when Beau Thatcher's boots hit the polished hardwood floor of his bedroom. At 58, his body still moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd spent 40 years working cattle and mining silver, though the joints protested more these days than they used to. He dressed in the half-dark, pulling on pressed trousers and a crisp white shirt, the uniform of a successful businessman, not a rancher. The white duster coat came last, a distinctive garment that had become his signature in Calico Ridge. Silver buckles gleamed even in the dim light. The house around him sat silent as a tomb. 15 rooms, each one meticulously maintained by Maria, his housekeeper of 20 years, and each one feeling emptier than the last. Beau moved through the halls like a ghost haunting his own life, his footsteps echoing off walls decorated with paintings he'd bought but never really looked at. Photographs of a younger, happier version of himself that seemed like a stranger now. In the kitchen, Maria had already started the coffee. She moved around the space with the quiet competence of someone who knew every inch of the house, every preference of its owner. At 63, she was one of the few people left who remembered the Thatcher Ranch when it had been full of life and laughter. "Morning, Mr. Beau," she said softly, her Spanish accent still thick after all these years in Montana. "Eggs and bacon?" "Just coffee, Maria. I'll eat in town after the auction." She nodded, pouring the dark brew into his cup. No sugar, no cream, black as his mood most mornings. "You going to buy those Herefords Pete mentioned?" "That's the plan." Beau sipped the coffee, feeling the heat spread through his chest. Ranch could use some new breeding stock. What he didn't say, what he never said, was that the ranch didn't need anything. The Thatcher Ranch sprawled across 15,000 acres of prime Montana grassland, supported 500 head of cattle, employed 12 ranch hands, and turned a profit that would make most men weep with envy. But profit wasn't the same as purpose, and Beau had learned that lesson the hardest way a man could. He took his coffee to the study, that sanctuary of leather and wood, where he conducted the business that had made him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams as a young prospector. The silver pocket watch sat on his desk, where he'd left it the night before, its engraved surface catching the first rays of dawn. He picked it up, running his thumb over the inscription he'd had made 21 years ago. "To my son, may time heal all wounds." Time, Beau had discovered, didn't heal a damn thing. It just made you better at carrying the weight. The watch had been meant for Thomas's 8th birthday, a gift to mark his boy becoming old enough to understand the value of time, the importance of being on time, being reliable, being the kind of man his father was trying and failing to be. But Thomas never made it to 8. The riding accident had taken him at 7, and the watch had sat in this drawer ever since. A promise broken before it could be given. Beau snapped the watch shut and slipped it into his vest pocket, the weight of it familiar against his chest. Some men carried photographs of their lost loved ones. Beau carried time itself, frozen at the moment his world had ended. Outside, old Pete was already organizing the day's work crew. At 72, Pete moved like a man 20 years younger, his weathered face creased with smile lines that Beau envied. Pete had worked the Thatcher Ranch since Beau's father's time, had taught young Beau how to rope and ride. and had been there the day they'd found Thomas's body at the bottom of Mercy Ravine. Morning. "Boss," Pete called out as Beau emerged onto the front porch. "Beautiful day for an auction." "Any day above ground is beautiful, Pete," the old foreman chuckled, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "That's the spirit. You want me to come along? Could use a new horse trailer if the price is right." "No need. I'll be back by supper." Beau walked to the stable where his truck sat waiting, a pristine black Ford that he kept as immaculate as everything else in his carefully controlled life. The drive to Calico Ridge took 40 minutes, winding through valleys where morning mist still clung to the grass, past homesteads where families were just beginning their day. Normal families, happy families, the kind of family Beau used to have before pride and ambition had stolen everything that mattered. Calico Ridge had seen better days. Once a booming silver town during the rush of the 1870s, it had settled into a slow decline as the mines played out and the railroad passed it by. Now it existed as a service town for the surrounding ranches, its main street lined with false-fronted buildings that had weathered 100 Montana winters. The auction house sat at the edge of town, a sprawling complex of corrals and barns where ranchers came to buy and sell livestock, equipment, and occasionally, today being one of those occasions, just about anything else. Beau pulled into the parking area, already half full of trucks and horse trailers. Saturday morning auctions drew folks from 50 miles in every direction, a social occasion as much as a business one. He recognized most of the vehicles, knew most of the men who'd be inside. Knew them, but didn't particularly care to spend time with them. Socializing had never been his strong suit, even before grief had made him into something harder. Colder, more isolated, inside the auction house, the air smelled of livestock, hay, and the sweat of working men. The crowd had already gathered, filling the wooden bleachers that surrounded the sale ring. Beau found a seat in his usual spot. Back row, aisle seat, where he could see everything and leave quickly when his business was done. He nodded to a few familiar faces, but didn't engage in conversation. That was the thing about being rich and standoffish. People eventually stopped trying. Sheriff Wade Collins sat 3 rows down, his bulk spilling over the narrow bench. Wade had been Beau's friend once, back when they were young and the world seemed full of possibility. They'd prospected together, chased the same girls, dreamed the same dreams. But friendship required maintenance, required opening yourself up, required being something other than a locked vault of grief and regret. Wade still tried sometimes, still invited Beau to poker games and church socials, but the invitations had grown less frequent over the years. The auctioneer, Jimmy Parsons, stepped up to the microphone, his amplified voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Calico Ridge Livestock and Estate Auction. We've got a fine selection today, some premium Herefords from the Morrison place, equipment from Old Thompson's farm, and a few specialty items we'll get to later. Let's get started." The auction moved at the rapid-fire pace Jimmy was famous for, his voice rising and falling in that hypnotic rhythm that could separate a man from his money before he knew what hit him. Beau waited patiently through the first hour, watching cattle parade through the ring, watching his neighbors bid and buy, watching the commerce of ranch life flow around him like water around a stone. The Herefords he'd come for arrived just before noon. Fine animals, thick-bodied and healthy, exactly what the ranch needed for the breeding program Pete had been pushing. Beau bid methodically, economically, and won them for a fair price. His business concluded he should have left, should have climbed back in his truck and headed home. But something made him stay, some whisper of intuition or fate that kept him in his seat as the auction moved into its specialty item section. "Now, folks," Jimmy announced, his voice taking on a different tone, "we've got something unusual today. As you know, the Henderson homestead burned down 3 weeks ago. Tragic loss, John and Sarah Henderson, good people gone too soon. They left behind a young daughter, 7 years old, no living relatives. The state was going to send her to the orphanage in Billings, but the Hendersons had some old debts and, well, we've got a special arrangement here in Calico Ridge for situations like this," Beau's attention sharpened. He knew about the Hendersons. Everyone did. The fire had been the talk of the territory, a terrible accident that had destroyed a struggling homestead and killed two of the hardest working people in the valley. But a child? This was the first he'd heard of a child. The girl's care and custody will be auctioned off today, in accordance with territorial guardianship laws that allow for private placement when the state can't provide. Now, this isn't slavery, folks. Let's be clear. This is guardianship. Whoever wins the bid takes legal responsibility for raising this child as their own. It's binding and permanent. The money goes to settle the Henderson debts and provide for the girl's future. This is a serious matter, and I expect serious bidders only. A murmur ran through the crowd, some approving, some uncomfortable. Beau felt his jaw tighten. The old guardianship laws were rarely invoked, relics of frontier justice from a rougher time. But they were still legal, still binding, and in a town like Calico Ridge, where the nearest judge was 3 days' ride away. Still, sometimes necessary. A door at the side of the auction ring opened, and a small figure emerged, led by Mrs. Crowley from the church. The girl couldn't have been more than 3.5 feet tall, dressed in a simple cotton dress that had seen better days, her dark hair hanging in tangles around a face smudged with dirt. But it was her eyes that caught Beau, huge, dark, haunted eyes that had seen things no child should see. In her arms, she clutched a tattered teddy bear, its fur worn away in patches, one button eye hanging by a thread. "This is Charlotte Henderson, goes by Lottie," Jimmy continued. 7 years old, healthy, can read and write some. Good girl, quiet, no trouble. Who'll start the bidding? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't like buying cattle or land. This was a human being, a child, and the weight of that responsibility hung heavy in the air. Beau watched as Lottie stood on the platform, her small shoulders squared, her chin lifted in defiance of the humiliation. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just stood there with a dignity that broke his heart. "Come now, folks," Jimmy prodded. "This girl needs a home. Someone start us off. How about $50? Silence. Men stared at their boots. Women whispered behind their hands. No one wanted to be the first, to be seen as the kind of person who'd buy a child like livestock. Beau understood their reluctance. There was something fundamentally wrong about this, something that violated every notion of decency and humanity. But the alternative, sending the girl to an overcrowded orphanage hundreds of miles away, where she'd be just another number, another mouth to feed, that seemed worse somehow. $50, a voice called out, and Beau's blood ran cold. Marcus Crane, the richest man in 3 counties, a land developer who'd made his fortune buying up struggling homesteads and consolidating them for railroad right-of-way. Crane was in his 60s, never married, and had a reputation for ruthlessness that made Beau's coldness look like warmth. $50 to Mr. Crane, Jimmy acknowledged, relief evident in his voice. "Do I hear 75? Beau watched Lottie's face as she looked at Crane. He saw fear flicker in those dark eyes, saw her small hands tighten on the teddy bear. Something in that gesture, that desperate grip on the one thing she had left in the world, pierced through the armor Beau had built around his heart. Without conscious thought, without calculation or reason, Beau's hand went up. $100, he heard himself say. The crowd turned to stare. Beau Thatcher, the hermit millionaire who hadn't spoken more than 10 words at a social gathering in 20 years, was bidding on a child. Shock rippled through the auction house like a stone thrown in still water. $100 to Mr. Thatcher, Jimmy said, surprise clear in his voice. Mr. Crane? Crane's eyes narrowed as he looked back at Beau. There was something calculating in that gaze, something predatory. 150, he counted. 200, Beau said immediately. The bidding war was brief and brutal. Crane drove the price up, testing Beau's resolve. But Beau had more money than God and less care for keeping it. At $500, more than twice what most ranchers made in a year, Crane finally shook his head and sat back, a smile playing at his lips that Beau didn't like one bit. Sold to Beau Thatcher for $500. Jimmy brought down his gavel. Legal papers will be drawn up immediate. Mr. Thatcher, you're now the legal guardian of Charlotte Henderson. with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Beau sat frozen, realizing what he'd just done. He'd bought a child, a living, breathing orphan child who would now be his responsibility, his charge, his daughter. The word hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't been a father in 20 years, hadn't wanted to be a father ever again. The pain of losing Thomas had been so devastating, so complete, that he'd sworn never to open himself to that kind of hurt again. And yet here he was, guardian to a 7-year-old girl who looked at him with those haunted eyes as Mrs. Crowley led her down from the platform. "Mr. Thatcher," Mrs. Crowley said, her voice gentle but firm, "this is Lottie. Lottie, this is Mr. Thatcher. He's going to take care of you now." Up close, Beau could see the tear tracks on her dirty face, the trembling of her lower lip that she was desperately trying to control. She was terrified, he realized. Terrified and trying so hard to be brave. Just like Thomas used to do when he was scared, putting on a brave face for his father. "Hello, Lottie," Beau managed, his voice rough. "Do you have anything? Any belongings?" She shook her head, clutching the teddy bear tighter. "Just Mr. Buttons, Mr. Buttons. The bear had a name." "Of course it did." "Well then," Beau said, feeling utterly out of his depth, "I suppose we should go home. The paperwork took an hour, signing documents, swearing oaths, accepting the weight of legal responsibility. Sheriff Collins witnessed the signatures, his expression a mix of surprise and something that might have been approval. "Good thing you're doing here, Beau," he said quietly. "Real good thing." Beau didn't respond. He wasn't sure it was a good thing at all. He wasn't sure of anything except that this small girl with her tattered bear was now his responsibility, and he had absolutely no idea what to do with her. The drive back to the ranch was silent. Lottie sat in the passenger seat, so small that her feet didn't reach the floor, Mr. Buttons clutched in her lap. She stared out the window at the passing landscape, and Beau wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling. He should say something, he knew. Should comfort her, reassure her, do whatever it was fathers were supposed to do. But the words wouldn't come. They'd been locked away too long. "Are you going to hurt me?" The question was so soft, Beau almost missed it. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going to hurt you ever." She nodded, accepting this, and went back to staring out the window. It wasn't much, but it was something, a first step in whatever this was going to be. When they pulled up to the ranch house, Maria was sweeping the porch. She stopped mid-stroke when she saw Lottie climb out of the truck, her eyes going wide with shock. Old Pete, who'd been working nearby, froze with a hammer in his hand. "Maria," Beau said, his voice carrying more uncertainty than it had in years, "we have a guest. This is Lottie. She'll be staying with us. Permanently." Maria's shock transformed into something softer, warmer. She set down her broom and came down the steps, kneeling to be at eye level with Lottie. "Hola, pequeña," she said gently. "Welcome to your new home. Are you hungry?" Lottie nodded, and Maria took her hand, leading her toward the kitchen. "Come, I'll make you something good. Do you like chicken soup?" As they disappeared into the house, Pete approached Beau, his weathered face creased with questions. "Boss, what in the name of—" "Don't ask." "Pete, I don't have answers." That night, after Maria had fed Lottie and found her some of the old clothes stored in the attic, too big, but clean, Beau stood outside the guest bedroom door, his hand raised to knock. He'd avoided the nursery upstairs, couldn't bear the thought of putting Lottie in Thomas's room. The guest room would have to do. He could hear movement inside, soft footsteps, the creak of the bed. He should go in, should tuck her in, should do something fatherly. But his hand wouldn't move, his feet wouldn't carry him forward. The fear was paralyzing, not of Lottie, but of what she represented. A second chance, a possibility of redemption, and the terrifying prospect of loss all over again. From inside the room, he heard a sound that made his heart clench, soft crying, muffled as if into a pillow. Lottie was crying herself to sleep in a strange house with a strange man, missing her parents, missing everything she'd known. And Beau stood outside the door like a coward, unable to comfort her. He lowered his hand and walked away, hating himself with every step. Back in his own room, he pulled out the silver pocket watch, staring at the inscription until the words blurred. May time heal all wounds. 20 years hadn't healed his. How was he supposed to heal hers? The watch ticked steadily in his palm, marking seconds that felt like judgments. He'd made a decision today that had changed both their lives. The question was whether he'd changed them for better or worse. Only time would tell, and time, Beau knew too well, was the cruelest judge of all. Dawn came too early. Filtering through curtains Beau had forgotten to close. He'd barely slept, his mind churning with the implications of what he'd done. A child. He'd brought a child into his carefully controlled, emotionally sterile world. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. He dressed quietly and made his way downstairs, expecting to find the house still asleep. Instead, he heard movement in the kitchen, not Maria's familiar sounds, but something softer, more hesitant. He paused at the kitchen door, peering in. Lottie sat at the large oak table, still wearing Maria's borrowed nightgown that pooled around her small frame. But she wasn't eating or crying or doing any of the things Beau had expected. She was drawing. Spread across the table were sheets of paper, Maria's shopping list paper, Beau realized, and scattered among them were sticks of charcoal. Not just any charcoal, but the expensive artist's charcoal Beau had bought for Thomas years ago, teaching materials for a boy who'd shown promise with a pencil. The set had been stored in the study, locked away in a drawer Beau hadn't opened in 20 years. His breath caught in his throat. How had she found them? Lottie worked with fierce concentration, her small hand moving rapidly across the paper, creating bold black strokes that gradually formed into an image. Even from the doorway, Beau could see it was a house, or what remained of one. Flames consumed the structure, rendered in sweeping lines of charcoal that seemed to dance and writhe on the page. In the foreground, two figures lay still, their forms barely suggested, but their meaning clear. "You're up early." Beau's voice came out rougher than he intended. Lottie's hand stopped mid-stroke. She looked up at him with those dark, haunted eyes. "I couldn't sleep," she said simply. "The dreams keep coming." Beau stepped into the kitchen, his attention fixed on the drawings scattered across the table. There were 5 of them, each depicting the same scene from slightly different angles. A house on fire, bodies on the ground, destruction rendered in stark black and white. But as he looked closer, he noticed details that made his pulse quicken. In one drawing, there were figures standing in the background, watching the flames. In another, she'd drawn what looked like wheel tracks, leading away from the scene. In a third, there was something that might have been a can or container near the house's foundation. "Lottie," he said carefully, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "These drawings, what are they?" "My house," she said, her voice matter-of-fact in the way children's voices could be when discussing terrible things. "The night it burned, you saw all this." She nodded, returning her attention to the current drawing. "I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard noises, voices. Papa told me to hide in the root cellar, so I did. I heard them talking before the fire started." Beau's hands clenched on the table's edge. "Them? Who are them?" "The men who came." Her hand moved across the page, adding shadows to the figures in the background. "They said Papa owed money. Said the land wasn't his anymore. Papa said they couldn't just take it. Then they pushed him down and Mama screamed and then—" Her voice broke, and she set down the charcoal stick with trembling fingers. "Then there was fire," Beau finished gently. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I stayed in the cellar like Papa said. Even when it got so hot I thought I would burn too. Even when I couldn't hear them screaming anymore. I stayed until morning, and then there was nothing left but ash and them." Beau felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart. This wasn't just an orphan who'd lost her parents in a tragic accident. This was a witness to murder, and somehow she'd ended up in his care, dropped into his life like a bomb waiting to explode. He looked at the charcoal sticks, recognizing them now, the expensive set he'd bought from a catalog out of San Francisco, hoping to nurture Thomas's artistic talents. The set he'd locked away because the sight of them was too painful, a reminder of all the potential that had died in Mercy Ravine. "Where did you find these?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "The locked drawer in the big desk," Lottie said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I just needed to draw it. I need to remember their faces before I forget. She shouldn't have been able to open that drawer. It had been locked for 2 decades. But children had a way of finding things, of slipping into spaces adults couldn't access. Just like Thomas had always found his way into places he wasn't supposed to be. "It's all right," Beau heard himself say. "You can use them. They were meant for—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "They were meant for drawing." Lottie's eyes widened slightly. "Really? They're so nice. I've never had real artist charcoals before. Bummer used to let me use the burnt ends from the stove, but these are—" She touched one reverently. "These are like magic." Beau stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to see something." "Stay here." He strode to his study, pulled out the county land records he kept for business purposes, and spread them across his desk. The Henderson homestead. He found it quickly. 40 acres of marginal grazing land at the edge of the valley. Nothing special. Except his finger traced the property lines, noting the adjacent parcels. The railroad survey from last year showed a proposed route cutting right through the Henderson property. And the land speculation company that had been buying up right-of-way, Marcus Crane. The name hit him like a fist to the gut. Crane, who'd bid on Lottie at the auction. Crane, who'd smiled that predatory smile when he'd finally backed down. As if losing the bid didn't matter because he'd already gotten what he wanted. The Henderson land. Beau's jaw tightened as the pieces fell into place. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been murder. Cold, calculated murder to acquire land for the railroad expansion. And Lottie had been meant to die too, eliminating any witnesses, any complications, but she'd survived. And now she was sitting in his kitchen, drawing evidence of murder with charcoal sticks meant for his dead son. He returned to the kitchen to find old Pete had arrived, standing awkwardly near the door while Lottie continued her drawing. Maria was there too, having come in through the back entrance, her hand pressed to her mouth as she looked at the images spread across her table. "Pete," Beau said, his voice carrying the authority of a military commander, a tone he hadn't used in 30 years, not since his cavalry days. "You were in town 3 weeks ago when the Henderson place burned." "Yes, sir," Pete said, straightening instinctively at the tone. "Helped with the bucket brigade, though there wasn't much left to save by the time we got there. Did you see anything unusual? Anyone who shouldn't have been there?" Pete's weathered face creased in thought. "Well, now that you mention it, I did see some of Crane's men riding away from that direction earlier in the evening. Didn't think much of it at the time. Crane's got business all over the valley. But their horses were lathered like they'd been riding hard, and they had that look men get when they've done something they'd rather not talk about." "Which men?" "Couldn't say for certain in the dark, but I'd recognize them if I saw them again. 3 riders. One of them definitely that tall fellow with the scar on his face. What's his name? Dalton. Crane's foreman." Beau nodded slowly, his mind working through the implications. "Don't mention this to anyone." "Not yet. Boss, if there's something criminal here—" "I said not yet, Pete. We need to be careful about this." Old Pete's eyes flicked to Lottie, understanding dawning. "Because of the girl." "Because of the girl," Beau confirmed. After Pete left, Beau sat back down across from Lottie. She'd finished the latest drawing. This one showing the men more clearly, their faces rendered with surprising detail for a child's hand. One of them had a distinctive scar running down his left cheek. "Lottie," he said carefully, "these men you saw, would you recognize them if you saw them again?" She nodded, not looking up from the drawing. "I see them every night when I close my eyes." Beau's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She was 7 years old and already carrying trauma that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Just like he carried Thomas's death, Catherine's departure, all the failures and regrets that weighed on his soul. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you tell anyone else about the men? About what you saw that night?" She shook her head. "Who would I tell?" "At the orphanage, they said it was an accident. They said I was lucky to be alive and I should be grateful. But it wasn't an accident, and I'm not—" Her voice broke again. "I'm not grateful that I lived when they died. Survivor's guilt." Beau recognized it because he lived with it every day. The guilt of being alive when Thomas was dead, of being the one who was supposed to be watching him, of choosing work over his son. "Listen to me," he said, leaning forward. "What happened to your parents wasn't your fault. And the fact that you survived, that's not wrong. That's not something to feel guilty about. You survived because your father loved you enough to hide you, to save you. Don't dishonor that by wishing you'd died too." The words surprised him. He'd never said them to himself, never allowed himself to believe that Thomas's death wasn't entirely his fault. But saying them to Lottie, seeing her dark eyes search his face for truth, he felt the weight of them. "Did you love your son?" she asked suddenly, the question coming out of nowhere. Beau froze. "How did you—" "Maria told me. Last night when she was helping me get ready for bed. She said you had a son named Thomas who died, and that's why you're so sad all the time." Of course Maria had told her. Maria, who'd been there through it all, who knew every painful detail of the Thatcher family tragedy. She would have wanted to prepare Lottie, to help her understand the broken man who'd become her guardian. "Yes," Beau said, his voice rough. "I loved him more than anything in the world." "Then you understand," Lottie said simply. "About missing someone so much it hurts to breathe." He did understand. God help him, he understood perfectly. The sound of horses approaching drew Beau's attention. Through the kitchen window, he could see Sheriff Collins riding up to the house, not alone but with 2 other men. Even from a distance, Beau recognized the second rider, Marcus Crane, sitting tall in his saddle like he owned the world. "Lottie," Beau said quickly, "I need you to go upstairs to your room right now. Take the drawings with you, all of them. Hide them somewhere safe. Can you do that?" She looked at him with those knowing eyes, understanding in an instant that something was wrong. "Yes, sir. And Lottie, don't come down until I come get you. No matter what you hear." She gathered the drawings quickly, clutching them to her chest along with Mr. Button's, and disappeared up the back stairs just as the knock came at the front door. Beau took a moment to compose himself, then walked to the door. Sheriff Collins stood on the porch, his face apologetic but determined. Beside him, Marcus Crane smiled with all the warmth of a snake eyeing a mouse. "Morning, Beau," Collins said. "Sorry to disturb you so early, but Mr. Crane here has some concerns he wanted to discuss." "Concerns," Beau repeated flatly. "About the girl," Crane said, his voice smooth as oil. "The orphan you acquired yesterday at the auction. I have reason to believe there may be irregularities in the guardianship arrangement." "What kind of irregularities?" "Questions about your suitability as a guardian. How shall I put this, emotional stability? A man who's lived alone for 20 years, who's had no contact with children in all that time, suddenly taking in a young girl. It raises questions, Thatcher. Questions about your motives." Beau's hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice level. "My motives are none of your concern, Crane. The guardianship is legal and binding. Sheriff Collins witnessed the papers himself." "True enough," Collins said, looking uncomfortable. "But Mr. Crane has filed a petition with the territorial court requesting a review of the arrangement. Says he's willing to take the girl himself, provide her with a proper home and education." "How charitable," Beau said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I suppose it has nothing to do with the Henderson property." Crane's smile widened. "I don't know what you're implying, don't you? The Hendersons' land just happened to burn the same week you were buying up right-of-way for the railroad. The parents just happened to die, leaving their property available for acquisition. And now you're here, trying to get custody of the only witness to—" "Careful, Thatcher," Crane interrupted, his smile vanishing. "You're making some serious accusations. Do you have any proof?" Beau held his gaze, thinking of the drawings upstairs, of Lottie's testimony. "Not yet." "Then I suggest you watch your tongue. Slander is a serious offense." Crane turned to Collins. "Sheriff, I trust you'll investigate Mr. Thatcher's suitability thoroughly. For the girl's sake." "Now hold on," Collins protested. "I've known Beau Thatcher for 30 years. He's a respected member of this community, a respected recluse, who hasn't shown interest in another human being since his wife left him," Crane countered. "A man obsessed with the past, living in a house full of ghosts. Is that really the environment for a traumatized child?" Each word was calculated to wound, and they hit their marks. But Beau didn't flinch, didn't react. He'd learned long ago how to bury pain deep, how to show nothing on his face, even when his heart was being carved out. "The court will decide," he said quietly. "Until then, Lottie stays with me." Crane's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. Come along, Sheriff. We've delivered our message." As they rode away, Maria appeared at Beau's elbow. "That man is evil," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "He wants to hurt that little girl." "He wants to silence her," Beau corrected. "She saw something the night of the fire, something that could ruin him. Then we must protect her." "Yes," Beau agreed, his jaw set with determination. "We must." He found Lottie in her room, sitting on the bed with the drawings spread around her and Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest. She looked up when he entered, her face pale. "Was that the man from the auction? The one who tried to buy me?" "Yes, he was one of them," she whispered. "One of the men outside my house that night. I didn't see his face clearly, but I heard his voice. He's the one who said Papa owed money." Beau's blood ran cold. "Are you certain?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm certain. He killed my parents, and now he wants to kill me too." Beau crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, something he hadn't done since Thomas was alive. "I won't let that happen. Do you understand me? I won't let anyone hurt you. How can you stop him? He's powerful. He has the sheriff. Collins is weak, but he's not corrupt. Not entirely. And Crane doesn't have me." Beau took her small hand in his much larger one. "I'm going to find out what happened to your parents. I'm going to prove that Crane was responsible. And I'm going to make sure he never hurts another family again." "Why?" Lottie asked, searching his face. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." Beau thought about that question, about the real answer. "Because you remind me of Thomas. Because I failed my son, and maybe I can succeed with you. Because for the first time in 20 years, I feel something other than grief and guilt. Because you woke me up from the living death I've been trapped in." But what he said was simpler. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because," he paused, the words difficult but necessary, "because you're under my protection now. That means something to me. It means everything." She threw her arms around his neck, the drawings scattering as Mr. Buttons fell to the floor. Beau froze for a moment, unprepared for the physical contact, the trust implicit in that embrace. Then slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around her small frame and held her as she cried. For the first time in 20 years, Beau Thatcher was a father again. And this time he swore to himself he wouldn't fail. The key to Thomas's nursery sat heavy in Beau's palm, its brass surface tarnished from 2 decades of neglect. He'd carried it in his pocket all day, feeling its weight like a stone of judgment. Now, standing in the hallway as evening shadows stretched across the floor, he couldn't put off the inevitable any longer. The lock turned with a resistance that spoke of years of disuse. The door swung inward, hinges protesting with a soft creak. Dust motes danced in the shaft of fading sunlight that spilled through the curtained window, illuminating a room frozen in time. Everything was exactly as Thomas had left it. The bed, still unmade from that last morning, when a 7-year-old boy had thrown back the covers and raced downstairs, eager to sneak out and ride his horse before his father woke. The toy soldiers arranged on the shelf, mid-battle, in whatever campaign Thomas's imagination had conjured. Books stacked on the nightstand, spine-creased and well-loved. And everywhere drawings, taped to the walls, scattered across the desk, pinned to a corkboard above the bed. Beau's knees went weak. He gripped the doorframe, breathing through the wave of grief that threatened to pull him under. 20 years, and the pain was still sharp enough to cut. He forced himself to move into the room, each step feeling like a violation of sacred ground. His hand trembled as he reached for the journal on the nightstand. Thomas's journal, the one Catherine had given him for his 6th birthday. "Write your thoughts," she'd told their son. "Write your dreams. Someday you'll look back and remember who you were." Beau sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress creaking beneath his weight. He opened the journal, and Thomas's handwriting, careful and childish, seemed to reach across the years. "Today, Papa showed me how to track a deer. He says you have to think like the animal, go where it would go. I think Papa can track anything. He's the smartest man in the whole world. Beau's vision blurred. He blinked hard, turning pages. Mama made apple pie today. She let me help with the crust. I ate so much my stomach hurt, but it was worth it. Papa said I'll make someone a fine wife someday, and Mama laughed and swatted him with her apron. I love when they laugh together. More pages, more glimpses of a life cut short. I'm going to be just like Papa when I grow up. I'm going to find silver and have a big ranch and help people. Papa says the most important thing is to do what's right, even when it's hard. He's the bravest man I know. The journal fell from Beau's hands as his shoulders began to shake. A sound emerged from his chest, raw, broken, a grief that had been locked away for 20 years, finally breaking free. He wept, as he hadn't wept since the funeral, as he hadn't allowed himself to weep when Catherine left, when the house grew silent. When the years stretched on empty and cold, he didn't hear the door creak wider, didn't sense the small presence until Lottie's hand touched his shoulder. "Mr. Beau." He looked up, tears streaming down his face, and saw her standing there in one of Maria's altered dresses, her hair brushed and braided, her eyes full of understanding far beyond her years. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I didn't mean for you to see. It's okay to cry," she said simply. "Sometimes it helps." She climbed onto the bed beside him, settling in like she belonged there, like it was the most natural thing in the world to comfort a grown man breaking apart. "Is this his room? Your son's?" Beau nodded, unable to speak. "It's nice," Lottie said, looking around with a child's curiosity. "He liked to draw too." She pointed to the pictures on the walls, horses and cowboys, ranch scenes and wild adventures rendered in crayon and pencil. "Yes," Beau whispered. "He did. Will you tell me about him?" The question should have been impossible to answer. For 20 years, Beau hadn't spoken Thomas's name aloud, except in the darkest moments of solitary grief. But with Lottie beside him, her small hand resting trustingly on his arm, the words came. "He was brave," Beau began, picking up the journal. "Braver than me. He wasn't afraid of anything." He opened to a random page and began to read aloud. "Listen to this. Today I climbed the big oak tree by the creek. Mama would be mad if she knew how high I went, but I could see the whole valley from up there. It was beautiful. Someday I want to climb every tree and see everything there is to see." Lottie smiled. "He sounds like he was fun." He was. He made everything an adventure. Even boring chores became quests or missions or great expeditions. Beau turned more pages, reading entries aloud, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. Each word was a small reclamation, a taking back of memories he'd locked away because they hurt too much. They sat there for an hour as daylight faded, Beau reading and Lottie listening, asking occasional questions that showed she understood more than most children her age should. She asked what Thomas looked like, what games he played, what his favorite foods were. Simple questions that pierced Beau's heart and healed it simultaneously. "He would have liked you," Beau said finally, closing the journal. "You're both artists, both brave." "I'm not brave," Lottie protested. "I'm scared all the time. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. You survived when others would have given up. You're drawing the truth even though it frightens you. That's courage, Lottie." She considered this, her brow furrowed. Then she reached out and took the journal from his hands. "Can I look at it sometimes? At his drawings and words?" The question should have hurt. The idea of anyone else touching Thomas's precious journal should have been unbearable. But instead, Beau felt something unexpected. Relief. Relief that these memories wouldn't die with him, that Thomas would live on in someone else's knowledge of him. "Yes," he said. "You can look at it whenever you want." She hugged the journal to her chest, much like she hugged Mr. Buttons, and Beau realized she was treating it with the same reverence, the same understanding that some things were precious beyond measure. "Thank you for letting me use the charcoals," she said. "They really are like magic." "They were his," Beau admitted. "I bought them for Thomas. We only got to use them a few times before—" He stopped, swallowed. "Before the accident. What happened?" Lottie asked. "How did he die?" Beau had never told the story, not fully, not to anyone. Catherine had been there, had lived through it with him. Maria and Pete knew the basics, but the details, the terrible specifics, those he'd kept locked inside. He wanted to prove he could ride like a man, Beau began, his voice distant. I'd been teaching him, but I'd told him he wasn't ready for the mountain trails yet. He was impatient, wanted to grow up faster than time would allow. One morning, he snuck out early and took my stallion, a horse too big and too spirited for a 7-year-old boy. The trail up to Mercy Ravine is steep and narrow. We think the horse spooked, maybe a rattlesnake or a cougar. Thomas was thrown. He paused, the next words almost impossible to form. He fell 300 feet onto the rocks below. Lottie's hand found his. You weren't there? I was working. Always working. Building the ranch, expanding the business, making money we didn't need. I was supposed to be watching him, but I was in my study, going over ledgers. The guilt was acid in his throat. If I'd been paying attention, if I'd checked on him, It wasn't your fault, Lottie said, her voice surprisingly firm. My papa used to say that sometimes bad things just happen, and it's not anybody's fault except maybe God's. And we can't understand his reasons. Your father was a wise man. He was, she agreed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And he loved Mama so much. They were always holding hands and smiling at each other. Even when things were hard, when the crops failed or the creditors came, they had each other. She looked at Beau with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Is that why your wife left? Because she blamed you? The question was too perceptive, too adult. But Beau found himself answering honestly. She blamed me, and I blame myself. There was too much guilt and grief in this house. It poisoned everything. One day she told me she was leaving, and I didn't even try to stop her. Did you love her? More than anything. Except Thomas. Then maybe, Lottie said carefully, you should tell her that. Maybe it's not too late. Beau almost laughed at the simplicity of it, the child's belief that love could fix anything. But Catherine was gone, had been gone for 20 years. She'd moved back east to be with her family, and Beau had let her go because he believed he deserved the loneliness, the punishment of living with his mistakes. Over the following weeks, a routine developed, fragile at first, then growing stronger with repetition. Breakfast together in the kitchen, Beau reading from Thomas's journal while Lottie drew or ate. Mid-morning, they'd work on her reading skills using Thomas's old books, Lottie proving to have a quick mind that soaked up knowledge like dry earth drinking rain. Afternoons brought ranch work, Lottie shadowing old Pete or Maria, learning the rhythms of life on the Thatcher ranch. But the evenings were their time. After dinner, they'd return to Thomas's room, no longer a shrine but a living space they shared, and Beau would read while Lottie drew. Sometimes she drew happy things, horses in pastures, Maria baking in the kitchen, the mountains at sunset. Other times, darker images emerged, the burning house, the shadowy figures, the memories that still haunted her nights. You need to learn to ride properly, Beau announced one morning at breakfast. I can't live on a ranch and not know how to handle a horse. Lottie's eyes lit up. Really? You'll teach me? Pete will start you on the basics. Once you're comfortable, I'll teach you the finer points. He paused, then added, we'll use Thomas's old saddle. It should fit you well enough. The saddle had been another artifact locked away, too painful to look at. But as Beau retrieved it from the tack room, wiping away the dust and conditioning the leather, he felt not pain, but purpose. The saddle would live again, would serve again, would carry another child toward their dreams. Lottie took to riding like she'd been born to it. Within days, Pete was marveling at her natural seat, her gentle hands, her instinctive understanding of the animals. She's got a gift, boss, Pete told Beau, just like young Thomas had. The comparison no longer stung. Instead, Beau felt pride, a emotion he'd thought dead, resurrecting itself with unexpected strength. Meanwhile, his investigation into the Henderson fire continued quietly. He couldn't risk alerting Crane, couldn't let anyone know what he suspected. But he made discreet inquiries, talked to the few people in town who might have information, slowly piecing together a picture of systematic land acquisition through intimidation and violence. The Henderson property hadn't been the first. Over the past 2 years, 4 other families had lost their homesteads to mysterious fires or accidents. Each time, Crane had purchased the land for pennies on the dollar. Each time, the railroad had benefited from another segment of right-of-way secured. Beau documented everything in a ledger hidden in his study, creating a record that could stand up in court if needed. But court required more than circumstantial evidence. It required proof, witnesses, physical evidence, something concrete that could tie Crane to the crimes. And that was where Lottie's drawings came in. "I need you to draw the men again," Beau told her one evening. "As clearly as you can remember them. Every detail matters." She nodded solemnly and set to work. For hours, she labored over the images, capturing not just faces, but distinctive features. A scar here, a bent nose there, the way one man stood with his weight on his left leg. When she finished, Beau had detailed sketches of 3 men, one of whom was definitely Crane's foreman, Dalton. "You're certain about their faces?" Beau asked. "I see them every night in my dreams," Lottie said, her voice small. "I couldn't forget them if I tried." Beau studied the drawings, his mind working. These could be evidence, but they could also be dismissed as a child's imagination. He needed corroboration, needed to connect these men to the crime in a way that couldn't be disputed. Maria entered the study carrying a tray of coffee and cookies. She set it down, then caught sight of the drawings spread across Beau's desk. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Maria!" Beau asked. "What is it?" "That man," she said, pointing to one of the sketches. "The one with the crooked teeth. I've seen him before." "Where?" "At the Mercantile, 2 weeks before the Henderson fire. He was buying kerosene. Lots of it. Said he needed it for lamps on a big ranch. But his hands," she paused, remembering. "His hands were soft, not ranch hands. And he paid in silver dollars, new ones, the kind Crane always uses." Beau's pulse quickened. "Would you testify to that?" Maria's face paled, but she nodded. "If it would help the Nina, yes, I would testify. It was a start. Not enough, but a start." That night, after Lottie had gone to bed, Beau sat in his study and did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out pen and paper and began to write. "Dear Catherine," the words came slowly at first, then faster as the dam broke. "I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll care. But there are things I need to say, things I should have said 20 years ago. I was wrong. About so many things. I was wrong to let work consume me. Wrong to take you and Thomas for granted. Wrong to believe that success in business meant anything compared to success as a husband and father. Wrong to let you leave without fighting for you, for us. I loved you. I love you still. That hasn't changed in 20 years of silence and separation. Something happened recently that you should know about. I've taken in a child, an orphan girl named Lottie. I know what you're thinking, that I'm trying to replace Thomas. But that's not it. Nothing could ever replace our son. This is something different. This is a chance to do better, to be better, to honor Thomas's memory by giving another child the love and protection I failed to give him. She's remarkable, Catherine. Brave and creative and resilient in ways that break my heart and heal it simultaneously. She's been through terrible things, witnessed horrors no child should see. And somehow, despite everything, she still believes in goodness. Still trusts enough to let herself be cared for. She asks about you, about why you left. I tell her the truth, that I drove you away with my selfishness and pride. She says I should write to you, should tell you that I'm sorry. She has more wisdom at 7 than I've accumulated in 58 years. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you were right to leave. Right to demand more than I was capable of giving. And I'm sorry it took losing you to understand what I'd lost. If you ever want to know about Lottie, about how she's growing and healing, I'd be honored to tell you. If you don't, I understand that too, with love and regret. Beau sealed the letter before he could change his mind. Addressed it to Catherine's family home in Boston, where she'd retreated after leaving Montana. Whether she still lived there, whether she'd read it, whether she'd respond, those were questions for fate to answer. In the morning, he gave the letter to Pete to post in town. Then he turned his attention to more immediate concerns, teaching Lottie to rope a fence post. investigating Crane's land acquisitions, and slowly, carefully, learning how to be a father again. Maria watched the transformation with knowing eyes. "The house is alive again," she told old Pete over morning coffee. "Haven't seen Mr. Beau smile like this in 20 years. "It's the girl," Pete agreed. "She's brought light back into the darkness." "More than that," Maria said. "She's given him a reason to live instead of just existing." That evening, after a successful roping lesson where Lottie had managed to lasso the fence post 3 times in a row, Beau found himself genuinely laughing, a sound so unfamiliar it startled him. Lottie had tried to rope one of the barn cats and ended up tangling herself in the rope, falling over with a surprised yelp that sent the cat scattering and brought forth the laughter Beau had thought dead. "Are you laughing at me?" Lottie demanded, trying to look indignant but unable to suppress her own giggles. "With you," Beau corrected, helping her untangle the rope. "There's a difference." "Papa used to say that too," she said, her smile fading slightly. "He laughed a lot. Mama said he could find joy in a dust storm. He sounds like he was a good man." "The best," Lottie agreed. Then with the directness that still caught Beau off guard, she added, "But so are you, Mr. Beau, the best man I know now." The words hit harder than any blow. Beau knelt down to her level, this small girl who'd somehow worked her way past every defense he'd built. "I'm not," he started, then stopped. "I'm trying, Lottie. That's all. Just trying to do right by you. That's what makes you good," she said, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Then she threw her arms around his neck, and Beau held her close, marveling at how something so small could feel so significant, how a heart he'd thought frozen could thaw enough to let love in again. 3 weeks after sending the letter, Beau had resigned himself to silence. Catherine wouldn't respond. Why would she? 20 years of silence couldn't be broken with a few pages of regret and apology. He'd said his piece, unburdened his conscience, and that would have to be enough. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the regular mail by young Danny Fletcher from the post office. Beau recognized the handwriting immediately, Catherine's elegant script, unchanged by the years. His hands trembled as he held the envelope, feeling the weight of it, the possibility it contained. Lottie was at the kitchen table, working on arithmetic problems Maria had set for her. She looked up when Beau entered, her sharp eyes noticing everything. "Is that from her?" "From your wife." Beau nodded, unable to speak. "Are you going to read it?" "Eventually. Now would be good," Lottie said with the practical wisdom of a child. "Otherwise you'll just worry about what it says." She was right, of course. Beau sat down at the table, carefully opened the envelope and began to read. "Beau, your letter arrived yesterday. I've read it a dozen times, searching for the trick, the manipulation, the Beau Thatcher I remember who could justify anything in service of his ambitions. But all I found was honesty and pain, and I don't know quite what to make of that. You ask if I'll read your letter. I have. You ask if I'll care. I do, though perhaps not in the way you hope. 20 years is a long time. Beau, long enough to build a new life, to heal from old wounds, to become someone different from the woman who fled Montana with a broken heart and empty arms. I won't lie and say I've forgiven you. Some hurts go too deep for simple forgiveness. But I've made peace with what happened, with my own role in our tragedy. I was so consumed by grief that I couldn't see your pain, couldn't reach through my own anguish to help you through yours. I blamed you entirely when the blame belonged to both of us, and to fate, and to a little boy's natural desire for adventure. You speak of a girl, Lottie. The name alone tells me she's changed you. The Beau I knew wouldn't have noticed an orphan, much less taken one in. You write about her with tenderness I haven't heard in your voice since Thomas was alive. It gives me hope that perhaps the man I loved isn't entirely lost to grief and guilt. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 20 years ago, but couldn't. When I left Montana, I was pregnant. Beau's heart stopped. The words blurred, came back into focus. Pregnant. Catherine had been pregnant when she left. We have a son, Beau. His name is Beau Jr., and he just turned 19. He has your eyes, your stubbornness, your sense of justice that sometimes borders on righteousness. He knows about you, knows about Thomas, knows the whole sorry story of why his mother fled across the country to raise him alone. I've kept him from you all these years, and I won't pretend it was for his protection. It was punishment, pure and simple. I wanted you to feel the loss I felt, the emptiness of a childless existence. It was cruel, and I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. Now he's grown, nearly a man, and he has questions I can't answer. Questions about his father, about Montana, about the family he never knew. He wants to meet you, Beau. He wants to see the ranch, to understand where he comes from. I'm bringing him to Montana next month. Not for reconciliation. I'm not ready for that, may never be ready. But he deserves to know his father, and you deserve to know your son. Consider it a gift you don't deserve, but I'm giving anyway because holding on to anger is exhausting. And life is too short for pride. Catherine P.S. Tell Lottie she's right, you should have written sooner. Children often have more wisdom than adults give them credit for. The letter fell from Beau's numb fingers. A son. He had another son, alive and grown. 19 years of life he'd missed completely. The room seemed to spin, reality shifting beneath his feet. Mr. Beau. Lottie's voice came from far away. Mr. Beau, what's wrong? He looked at her, this small girl who'd somehow become the center of his world, and tried to find words. I have a son, he managed. Another son. Catherine, my wife, she was pregnant when she left. She had our baby back east and raised him alone. Lottie's eyes went wide. You have a son? How old? 19. That's almost grown up. She scrambled out of her chair and came to him, putting her small hand on his arm. That's good, isn't it? That's a good thing? Was it? Beau's mind reeled. Joy and anger warred within him. Joy at having another child. Anger at Catherine for keeping him a secret for nearly 2 decades. But beneath both emotions lay something deeper, fear. Fear that this son would hate him, would see him as the monster who'd killed Thomas through negligence, who'd driven Catherine away with his selfishness. I don't know, Beau said honestly. I don't know if it's good or terrible or something in between. Maria had entered the kitchen during the exchange. She came forward now, gently taking the letter from where it had fallen on the table. She read it quickly, her hand flying to her mouth. Dios mío, she whispered. All these years, I thought. She stopped, shook her head. She told me she lost the baby, that the grief had caused a miscarriage. She made me promise not to tell you, said it would only add to your pain. She lied, Beau said, the words bitter. She was hurting, Maria countered. People do terrible things when they're drowning in grief. I was hurting too. That gave me no right to... He stopped, recognizing the truth in his own words. He'd done terrible things in his grief too. He'd shut everyone out, built walls around his heart, lived as a ghost among the living. Who was he to judge Catherine's choices? She's bringing him here, Lottie said, reading over Maria's shoulder with the improved literacy Beau had been teaching her. Next month, you're going to meet your son. Her excitement was pure, untainted by the complex emotions churning in Beau's chest. To her, this was simple. More family was always good. She didn't understand the complications, the history, the weight of almost 20 years of lies and silence. What if he hates me? Beau asked, the vulnerability in his voice surprising even himself. Lottie looked at him with those dark, knowing eyes. Then you'll love him anyway, she said simply. That's what parents do, out of the mouths of babes, Beau thought. She was right, of course. Whatever this Beau Jr. thought of him, whatever anger or resentment he carried, didn't matter. He was Beau's son, and that meant loving him unconditionally, even if that love was never returned. The rest of the day passed in a fog. Beau tried to work, tried to focus on ranch business or the investigation into Crane's crimes, but his mind kept circling back to the revelation. A son named after him, nearly grown, and a stranger. That evening, after Lottie had gone to bed, Beau pulled out an old photograph album he'd hidden away years ago. In it were pictures of Catherine, young and beautiful, smiling at the camera with Thomas in her arms. He ran his finger over her face, trying to imagine the woman she'd become, the mother she'd been to a son he'd never known. On the nightstand, the silver pocket watch caught the lamplight. To my son, may time heal all wounds. The inscription took on new meaning now. He had 2 sons, one dead, one alive. Time hadn't healed the wound of losing Thomas, but perhaps it could create space for a relationship with Beau Jr. He picked up the watch, opened it, closed it. The mechanical tick seemed to count down to the meeting that would change everything. 1 month, 30 days to prepare himself to be a father again. Not to a 7-year-old girl, but to a 19-year-old man who had every reason to despise him. The sound of footsteps in the hall drew his attention. Lottie appeared in the doorway. Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest, her feet bare on the wooden floor. "Couldn't sleep?" Beau asked. She shook her head and padded into the room, climbing onto the chair across from his desk. "I had a nightmare." "About the fire. Want to talk about it?" "Not really." She paused, then asked, "Are you scared?" "About meeting your son." "Terrified," Beau admitted. "Me too," Lottie said. "About meeting your wife." "What if she doesn't like me? What if she thinks you should send me away so you can be a family with your real son?" Beau's heart clenched. "You are my real family, Lottie. Nothing will change that, but he's your blood. Your actual child. So are you," Beau said firmly. "Maybe not by blood, but by choice, by love. That counts just as much, maybe more." Lottie studied him, her expression skeptical. "You really believe that?" "I do. Thomas was my blood son, and I loved him more than life itself. But you chose me, Lottie. You could have hated me for buying you like cattle, could have run away, could have shut me out. Instead, you let me into your life, trusted me with your pain, gave me a reason to feel again. That's a gift I don't deserve, but treasure all the same." She blinked back tears. "I didn't choose you. You chose me at the auction, and every day since, we've chosen each other. That's what family is, a choice we make every morning to love and care for each other, even when it's hard." Lottie climbed down from her chair and came around the desk. Without hesitation, she crawled into Beau's lap, something she'd never done before. He froze for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Will you still love me when he comes?" she whispered against his chest. "Always," Beau promised. Nothing and no one could change that. They sat like that for a long time, drawing comfort from each other, 2 wounded souls finding healing in their unlikely bond. Finally, Lottie's breathing deepened, and Beau realized she'd fallen asleep. He carried her gently to her room and tucked her into bed, pressing a kiss to her forehead, the first such gesture he'd made since Thomas died. Back in his study, he began to write another letter. "Catherine, thank you for telling me about our son. The anger I should feel at being kept in the dark is overwhelmed by joy at knowing I have another child. Another chance to be the father I failed to be. Bring him to Montana. Let me meet the young man you've raised. Let me try to build a relationship with him, even if I don't deserve one. You're right that I don't deserve this gift, but I'll accept it gratefully and do everything in my power to be worthy of it. As for Lottie, you should know that she's changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. She's brought life back to this empty house, laughter to rooms that have been silent for too long. She's given me purpose beyond business, beyond survival. She's given me hope. I don't know what will happen when you arrive. I don't know if we can be a family again, or if too much time has passed, too much pain accumulated. But I know that we both love our sons, the one we lost and the one I've yet to meet, and perhaps that love can be a bridge across 20 years of silence. Come soon. I'll be counting the days." He sealed the letter and set it aside to post in the morning. Then he reached for the watch chain around his neck, the one that held Catherine's wedding ring. The ring he'd worn next to his heart for 20 years, like a hairshirt of grief and regret. He unclasped the chain, held the ring in his palm. It was time to let go, time to stop punishing himself with symbols of loss. But he couldn't quite bring himself to put it away completely. Instead, he placed it in the desk drawer alongside Thomas's journal and Lottie's drawings, artifacts of love and loss, carefully preserved but no longer worn as wounds. Morning came too soon. Beau woke to find Lottie already in the kitchen, working on a drawing. But this one was different from her usual stark charcoal renderings. This one was done in colored pencils. Maria must have bought them in town, and it showed a house with people standing in front of it. A man and a girl holding hands, and two other figures approaching in the distance. "What's this?" Beau asked, looking over her shoulder. "Our family," Lottie said matter-of-factly. "That's you and me, and that's your son and your wife coming home." "I figured if I drew it happy, maybe it'll come true." Beau's throat tightened. "That's beautiful, Lottie. You can hang it in your study if you want, next to the picture of Thomas." The fact that she'd included Thomas in the tableau, a small figure standing in the doorway of the house, made Beau's eyes burn. She understood that Thomas would always be part of their family, even in death, and she'd found a way to honor that while making room for new members. "I'd be honored to hang it in my study," Beau said. As he framed the picture later that day, old Pete came into the study with troubling news. "Boss, we've got a problem. Found 3 head of cattle with our brand dead in the south pasture. Poisoned, looks like." Beau's jaw tightened. "Crane, that'd be my guess. He's getting bolder, more aggressive. This is a message. Back off the investigation or things will get worse." "Let them get worse," Beau said grimly. "I'm not backing off. Not when we're so close to having enough evidence to bring him down." "It's not just the cattle I'm worried about," Pete said, lowering his voice. "If he's willing to kill livestock, he's willing to do worse." "The girl is protected," Beau cut him off. "I won't let Crane or anyone else hurt her." "And how are you planning to protect her when Catherine and the boy arrive? You think Crane won't use that as an opportunity?" "More targets means more vulnerability." Pete was right, and Beau knew it. But what choice did he have? He couldn't turn Catherine away, couldn't deny his son the chance to meet his father. And he wouldn't sacrifice his investigation into the Henderson murders just because Crane was making threats. "We'll hire more guards," Beau decided. "Double the watch on the house and the south pasture where Lottie rides. And we accelerate the investigation. I want enough evidence to take to the federal marshal in Helena within 2 weeks. That's ambitious. That's necessary. The sooner we bring Crane down, the sooner Lottie is safe." Pete nodded and left to organize the security measures. Beau turned back to Lottie's drawing, studying it with new eyes. She'd drawn them all together, happy and safe. But the reality was far more complicated. Crane was escalating his attacks. Catherine was bringing their son, a son who might hate him. And Beau was caught in the middle, trying to protect Lottie while building a relationship with a family he'd lost and found again. The silver watch on his desk ticked steadily, counting down to a confrontation that seemed inevitable. Time was running out, and Beau could only hope that when it did, he'd be ready for whatever came next. The wood shavings fell like snow around Beau's boots, curling away from the knife blade in delicate spirals. He'd forgotten the pleasure of working with his hands on something other than ranch business, the simple joy of creation rather than profit. The wooden horse was taking shape slowly, emerging from the rough block of pine like a memory made solid. Lottie sat across from him on the porch, her sketchbook open on her lap, charcoal moving across the page in confident strokes. She was drawing him, he realized, capturing the concentration on his face, the careful movements of his hands. It embarrassed him, being observed so closely, but he said nothing. Let her draw. It was healthy, therapeutic, a way of processing the world that seemed to calm her nightmares. "Tell me about when you were young," she said, not looking up from her work. "Before the silver, before the ranch. Who were you then?" Beau considered the question, his knife pausing mid-stroke. "I was nobody, really. The second son of a struggling rancher, the one who wasn't expected to amount to much. My brother got the ranch when my father died. I got a horse, a bedroll, and $50. What did you do?" "Joined the cavalry for a while. Saw some action against the Apache down in Arizona Territory. Learned to shoot, to track, to survive." He resumed carving, shaping the horse's mane with delicate cuts. "After my service was up, I tried my hand at prospecting. Most men spend their whole lives chasing silver and never find so much as a nugget. I got lucky, stumbled onto a vein that made me rich beyond imagining. Was it wonderful?" "Being rich?" Beau laughed, but there was no humor in it. "For a while, I could buy anything, go anywhere, be anyone. I met Catherine at a dance in Virginia City. She was teaching at the schoolhouse there, prettiest woman I'd ever seen. Smart, too. Too smart for a roughneck prospector with more money than sense. But she married you anyway." She did. Against her family's wishes, against all good judgment. We built this ranch together, had Thomas, and for a few years I had everything a man could want. He stopped carving, the knife still in his hand. Then I got greedy. Started expanding, investing, building an empire instead of appreciating what I had. And I lost it all. Not the money, but everything that mattered. Lottie was quiet for a moment, her charcoal moving in soft strokes. Do you think second chances are real? Like, can people really start over? I used to think not, Beau admitted. Used to think that mistakes were permanent, that grief was forever, that broken things stayed broken. But then you came along and he gestured vaguely with the knife. I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong. Good, Lottie said firmly, because I think you deserve a second chance. Maybe even a third one when your wife and son get here. The investigation had been progressing steadily, piece by piece, building a case against Marcus Crane. Beau had documented 12 suspicious property acquisitions over the past 3 years, each one involving tragedy and each one benefiting Crane's railroad expansion. But documentation wasn't enough. He needed witnesses willing to testify, physical evidence that could stand up in court. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young ranch hand named Billy Morrison, barely 18, came to Beau's door late one evening. His hat clutched nervously in his hands. "Mr. Thatcher," Billy stammered, "I need to talk to you about something. Something important." Beau led him into the study, poured him a whiskey to steady his nerves. "What's on your mind, Billy?" "I used to work for Mr. Crane," Billy began, his voice shaking. "Not on the ranch, in his other operations. The ones he don't talk about in polite company." He took a gulp of whiskey. "I was there the night the Henderson place burned. I wasn't part of it, you understand. I was just holding the horses. But I saw everything." Beau's pulse quickened. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Billy's story matched Lottie's drawings with eerie precision. 3 men, Dalton Webb and a man called Snake, had ridden to the Henderson homestead after dark. They'd confronted John Henderson about selling his land, and when he refused, they'd beaten him, shot his wife when she tried to intervene, and set fire to the house to cover their crimes. They hadn't known about Lottie in the root cellar. "Why are you telling me this now?" Beau asked. "Because it ain't right," Billy said, his young face twisted with anguish. "You killing folks for land, that ain't business, that's murder. And when I heard you'd taken in the Henderson girl, when I heard Crane was trying to get custody of her," he shook his head, "I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet and something happened to that child. You realize what this means? If you testify, Crane will come after you. I know. But I also know I can't sleep at night as it is. Might as well do the right thing and face the consequences." Beau studied the young man, seeing courage and conviction warring with fear. "I'll protect you, Billy, you have my word. But I need you to write down everything you saw, everything you know, and sign it. Can you do that?" Billy nodded and spent the next 2 hours writing out a detailed statement. When he finished, Beau had exactly what he needed. A witness testimony that corroborated Lottie's account and tied Crane directly to murder. But the victory was short-lived. 3 days later, Billy's body was found in the river, an apparent drowning. The sheriff ruled it an accident. Too much whiskey and a midnight swim gone wrong. But Beau saw the bruises on Billy's face, the marks that suggested he'd been held under until he stopped struggling. Crane was eliminating witnesses. The realization hit Beau like a physical blow. He'd thought he could investigate quietly, build his case without putting anyone in danger. But Crane was more ruthless than he'd imagined, more willing to kill to protect his empire. And if Crane had killed Billy to silence him, he wouldn't hesitate to kill Lottie. "We need to move faster," Beau told old Pete that night. "Crane knows we're building a case. He's killing anyone who might testify against him. Then we go to the federal marshal now, with what we have. It's not enough. Billy's testimony is dead with him. We need more evidence, more witnesses who can't be silenced." "The girl," Pete said reluctantly. "Her testimony—" "No," Beau's voice was hard. "I won't put Lottie on a witness stand. Won't make her relive that night in front of a courtroom full of strangers. There has to be another way, but what way? Physical evidence from the Henderson homestead had been destroyed in the fire. Other potential witnesses were either dead or too terrified to speak. The only solid evidence left was in Lottie's drawings and her memories, and Beau would burn every piece of evidence before he'd traumatize her further. He returned to the porch, where he'd left the wooden horse. The carving was nearly complete now, just needed sanding and perhaps some paint. Lottie had finished her drawing of him and had moved on to a new subject, a family portrait, he realized, showing himself, Lottie, and two shadowy figures that must represent Catherine and Beau Jr. "It's beautiful," he said. Sitting beside her, "It's hope," she corrected. "I'm drawing what I want to happen, not what is. Sometimes wanting something badly enough can make it real. Do you really believe that?" Beau looked at the wooden horse in his hands, the first creative thing he'd made since Thomas died. "I'm starting to," he admitted. The days passed with agonizing slowness. Each morning brought the possibility of Catherine's arrival. Each evening brought relief that Crane hadn't made another move. Beau doubled the guards around the ranch, hired additional hands whose loyalty he could trust, and slept with a loaded rifle beside his bed. Lottie's riding skills had improved dramatically under old Pete's tutelage. She sat a horse like she'd been born to it, her small frame perfectly balanced, her hands gentle but firm on the reins. Watching her ride reminded Beau painfully of Thomas, but it also filled him with pride. She was learning, growing, healing, becoming more than just a traumatized orphan. One afternoon, as she was practicing jumps in the corral, Maria came running from the house waving a telegram. "Mr. Beau, it's from Mrs. Catherine. They arrive on tomorrow's train." Tomorrow, the word hit Beau like a gunshot. Tomorrow he'd meet his son for the first time. Would face the wife he hadn't seen in 20 years. Would have to explain Lottie and the investigation and everything that had changed. "Tomorrow," he repeated. His mouth dry, Lottie dismounted and came to the fence, her face flushed from exercise. "Are you ready?" "No," Beau said honestly. Not even close. That night, he worked on the wooden horse with renewed intensity, determined to finish it before Catherine arrived. It needed to be perfect. A tangible symbol of the change in him. Proof that he was capable of creating something beautiful instead of just destroying through negligence and pride. As he applied the final coat of varnish, Lottie appeared in the doorway of his study. She was wearing one of her nicer dresses. Maria had been taking in clothes from town, creating a wardrobe suitable for a rancher's daughter. "Can I ask you something?" she said, unusually hesitant. "Always. What if they don't like me? What if your wife thinks I'm trying to replace Thomas, or your son thinks I'm taking his place?" Beau set down the horse and pulled Lottie into his lap, something that had become natural over the weeks. "Listen to me carefully. You are not replacing anyone. You are not taking anyone's place. You are Lottie, unique and precious and loved for exactly who you are. But what if? No what-ifs," Beau said firmly. "Whatever happens, whatever Catherine or Beau Jr. think or feel, you are my daughter now. Not by blood, not by law alone, but by choice and love. Nothing will change that." She buried her face in his chest, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he admitted. "But we'll face it together. That's what families do." The next morning dawned clear and bright, mocking Beau's anxiety with its cheerfulness. He dressed carefully, choosing his best suit, trimming his beard, trying to look like a man worthy of a second chance. Lottie wore a new dress Maria had made specially for the occasion, her hair braided and decorated with wildflowers. "You look beautiful," Beau told her, and she beamed. "You look handsome," she replied. "Like a real father." The words hit him harder than she could know. A real father. That's what he was trying to be, what he'd failed to be for Thomas, what he desperately wanted to be for both Lottie and this unknown son. They took the wagon into town, old Pete driving while Beau and Lottie sat in the back, both too nervous to speak. The train station was busy, families waiting for arrivals, merchants expecting shipments, the normal commerce of a frontier town. And then the train appeared in the distance, its whistle cutting through the morning air like a judgment. Beau's heart hammered in his chest. In moments, he'd see Catherine again, would meet his son, would have to face the consequences of 20 years of choices, good and bad. Lottie's hand found his, small and trusting. He squeezed it gently, drawing strength from her faith in him. The train pulled into the station in a cloud of steam and coal smoke. Doors opened, passengers descended. And there, stepping onto the platform, was Catherine. She'd aged, of course, they both had. But she was still beautiful, still carried herself with that grace that had first captured his heart. Her hair was streaked with grey, her face lined with time and experience. But her eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, seeing everything. And beside her stood a young man who looked so much like Beau at that age, it took his breath away. Tall and broad-shouldered, with Beau's dark hair and Catherine's fine features. He carried himself with quiet confidence that spoke of good, upbringing and natural character. Their eyes met across the platform, Beau's and Catherine's, and 20 years collapsed into a moment of recognition, and regret and possibility. Then Catherine's gaze shifted to Lottie, and Beau saw her expression soften with something that might have been understanding or approval or simple maternal instinct. Beau stood, helping Lottie down from the wagon. Together, they walked toward the family they'd lost and found again, toward a future uncertain but full of promise. The wooden horse sat in Beau's pocket, a talisman of hope ready to be given to the girl who'd saved him from himself. Catherine crossed the platform with measured steps, her son, their son, walking beside her like a guardian. Beau watched them approach, his throat tight, his hand unconsciously gripping Lottie's tighter. The girl pressed against his side, and he could feel her trembling. "Beau," Catherine said when she reached them. Her voice was the same, that cultured Eastern accent softened by years in Montana, then sharpened again by her return east. "You look—" She paused, studying him. "Different. Better than I expected, Catherine." The name felt strange on his tongue after 20 years of silence. "Thank you for coming." An awkward pause stretched between them, filled with 2 decades of unspoken words. Then Catherine's attention shifted to Lottie, and her expression gentled. "This must be Lottie," she said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the girl. "I've heard so much about you." Lottie, who'd been so brave facing down Crane at the auction, who'd survived murder and fire and loss, suddenly became shy. She buried her face against Beau's leg, peeking out at Catherine with one eye. "It's all right," Beau said softly, resting his hand on her head. "This is Mrs. Catherine. He hesitated over the label. "She's family." The young man stepped forward and Beau got his first close look at his son. The resemblance was striking, not just physical, but in the way he held himself, the directness of his gaze, the set of his jaw that spoke of stubborn determination. "I'm Beau Jr., the young man said, extending his hand. "Or just Junior, if that's easier." Beau took his son's hand, feeling the calluses there that spoke of hard work despite Catherine's Eastern life. The handshake was firm, neither hostile nor particularly warm, neutral territory, while they figured each other out. "It's good to meet you, a son," Beau managed, the word son feeling both natural and impossible. Junior nodded, then looked down at Lottie with curiosity. "And you must be my little sister." The words hung in the air, their significance enormous. Junior had claimed Lottie as family without hesitation, without judgment, accepting the situation with a maturity that made Beau's chest tight with unexpected pride. Lottie looked up at Junior, her eyes wide. "I'm not your real sister," she said, her voice small. "Real enough," Junior replied with a slight smile that reminded Beau of Catherine. "If my father says you're family, that's good enough for me." The tension broke slightly. Lottie smiled back, tentative but genuine, and Catherine stood brushing dust from her traveling dress. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private," she suggested, glancing around the busy platform where their reunion was drawing curious stares. The ride back to the ranch was conducted in near silence, everyone too overwhelmed with the momentousness of the situation to make small talk. Lottie sat between Beau and Catherine in the wagon, a physical bridge between past and present. Junior rode up front with old Pete, asking intelligent questions about the ranch that Pete answered with growing approval. When they pulled up to the house, Beau watched Catherine's face for reaction. She'd lived here once, had made this house a home, had buried her son from its front porch. What memories must be flooding back? "It looks the same," she said quietly. "I half expected you to burn it down and build something new, something without ghosts." "I tried living with the ghosts," Beau admitted. "Turns out they're better company than complete isolation." Maria greeted them at the door, tears streaming down her face as she embraced Catherine. "Senora, after all these years, you came back." "Hello, Maria," Catherine said, returning the embrace. "It's good to see you, and this must be young Beau." Maria turned to Junior, studying him with frank appreciation. "Aye, you look just like your father did at your age. Handsome devil, that one was." Junior grinned, and Beau saw a glimpse of the boy beneath the serious young man. "Thank you, ma'am. Mother's told me stories about you, how you kept the household running, how you made the best tamales in Montana." "Still do," Maria said proudly. "Come, I'll make you some for lunch." As they settled in, Beau found himself watching the dynamics unfold. Catherine moved through the house like a ghost returning to her haunting grounds, touching familiar objects, pausing at doorways, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Junior explored with open curiosity, asking questions about the ranch's operations that showed he'd been well-educated and had a head for business. And Lottie hovered near Beau, uncertain of her place in this expanded family. After lunch, Maria's promised tamales, which even Catherine admitted were as good as she remembered. Beau suggested they talk privately. He led Catherine to his study, while Junior and Lottie stayed in the kitchen with Maria, an arrangement that seemed to suit everyone. In the study, Catherine moved immediately to the photograph of Thomas on the desk. She picked it up with trembling hands, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I haven't looked at his picture in years," she whispered. "Couldn't bear it. I looked at it every day," Beau said. "Like punishment, like penance. Reminding myself of what I'd lost through my own negligence." Catherine set down the photograph and turned to face him. "We both lost him, Beau. We both blamed ourselves and we both blamed each other. And neither of us was entirely wrong or entirely right. I should have been watching him, and I should have stayed to help you grieve instead of running away." She wrapped her arms around herself. "We failed each other when we needed each other most. Why didn't you tell me about the baby?" The question came out more plaintive than Beau intended. "Why did you let me think because I was cruel?" Catherine interrupted. "Because I wanted you to hurt the way I was hurting. Because I couldn't forgive you, and I didn't want to give you the comfort of knowing you had another child to love." She met his eyes, unflinching. "It was petty and vindictive and wrong. And I regret it every day." Beau was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then he pulled something from his pocket, the silver pocket watch. He held it out to her. "Do you remember this?" "The watch you had made for Thomas." Catherine's voice broke. "To my son may time heal all wounds." "Time didn't heal the wounds," Beau said. "It just made them familiar, easier to carry. But then Lottie came, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose, responsibility, love." He turned the watch over in his hands. "I want to give this to Junior, if that's all right with you." That evening, after the sun had set and Crane's watchers had melted back into the darkness, Beau found himself unable to sleep. The house felt different with Catherine and Junior under its roof, both familiar and strange, like a memory that didn't quite match reality. He wandered to his study, seeking comfort in the familiar space, and found himself drawn once again to Thomas's journal. He'd read most of it by now, had shared the entries with Lottie, but something made him pick it up again. Turning to the back pages, he'd mostly skipped because the later entries were too painful. Written just days before the accident, the journal fell open, and something slipped out, an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had cracked but not broken. Beau's heart stopped. The handwriting on the outside was Catherine's. His hands trembled as he turned it over. It was addressed to him, marked to be opened if something happens to me. Catherine's words, written over 20 years ago and hidden in their son's journal, where Beau would eventually find them, except he'd locked the journal away. unable to face it until Lottie had forced him to open that wound. He broke the seal, unfolded the paper, and began to read. "My dearest Beau, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. I hope you find this letter quickly, that it doesn't languish hidden for years. But knowing you, knowing how you bury pain deep and refuse to face it, I suspect this might sit undiscovered for longer than I'd like. I need to tell you something. Something I couldn't say to your face because I'm afraid. Afraid of your reaction, afraid of what it means for our future. Afraid that this secret might destroy us, even as I hope it might save us. I'm pregnant. Beau, we're going to have another child." Beau's breath caught in his throat. Catherine had been pregnant before Thomas died. She'd known and hidden it from him. I should be overjoyed. I should be sharing this news with you, celebrating this blessing. But instead, I'm terrified. Terrified that this house, this life, this cursed existence we've built on ambition and profit will destroy this child too. That we'll lose another son or daughter to the demons that stalk the Thatcher ranch. I'm writing this the day after Thomas snuck out to ride. He could have died, Beau. He took your stallion and rode into the mountains alone, and only by God's grace did he come back alive. When I saw him trotting up the drive, muddy and proud of his adventure, I nearly collapsed with relief. But it made me realize something terrible. We're failing our son. You're so consumed with building your empire that you don't see him growing up wild and desperate for your attention. And I'm so exhausted from trying to manage everything you ignore that I can't protect him the way a mother should. This new child deserves better. Deserves parents who are present, who prioritize love over profit, who understand that family is everything. If I die before this baby is born, I want you to know that I loved you. Loved you enough to hope you'd change, to believe that the man I married still exists beneath the ambition. Find him, Beau. Find the man who dreamed of a family, not a fortune. Find the father Thomas needs, the father this new child deserves. If I die after the baby arrives, please love this child as you should have loved Thomas. Give them the attention, the presence, the devotion that you gave to your business. Let them save you from yourself, and if I live, if we both survive, and this letter remains hidden until some distant future, then know that I wrote this in fear and love, hoping that by the time you find it, we'll have become the family we were meant to be. All my love. Catherine Beau's hands shook so violently, the letter fell to the desk. Catherine had written this before Thomas died, had carried this pregnancy while mourning their son's reckless adventure, had known she was going to have another child when the real accident happened. She'd been pregnant when Thomas fell to his death. The implications crashed over him like an avalanche. Catherine had lost Thomas while carrying his sibling, had buried their son while growing new life inside her, had left Beau not just from grief, but to protect the unborn child from the cursed house, the negligent father, the life that had killed one son and might kill another. "Oh, God," Beau whispered. "Oh, Catherine, what you went through." He understood now in a way he never had, the depth of her pain. She hadn't just lost a child, she'd been pregnant with another while coping with that loss, had felt the baby move inside her while planning Thomas's funeral, had made the impossible choice to leave the father of both her children to save the one still living, Beau. Catherine's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her nightgown, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her face pale in the lamplight. "I couldn't sleep. I heard—" She stopped, seeing the letter on his desk. Her face went white as snow. "Where did you find that?" "In Thomas's journal," Beau said, his voice rough with emotion. "You hid it there, didn't you? Wanted me to find it when I finally found the courage to read his words." Catherine's knees buckled. She grabbed the doorframe for support. "I thought you'd find it within days, weeks at most. I never imagined you'd lock the journal away for 20 years. You were pregnant when Thomas died," Beau said, the words barely audible. "You buried our son while carrying our other child." Tears streamed down Catherine's face. "I couldn't tell you. You were destroyed by guilt, drowning in grief. If you'd known about the baby, you would have clung to that hope, and I couldn't bear the thought of you loving another child the way you'd loved Thomas, loving them and then losing them because you were too busy, too distracted. Too consumed with building your empire to actually be a father, so you took my child away. I took my child away, Catherine corrected, her voice breaking, to protect him. To give him a chance at life with a parent who would actually be present, actually care more about his well-being than the next business deal. Beau stood, the movement sudden enough to make Catherine flinch. But he didn't approach her. He couldn't, not yet. You had no right to make that choice alone, and you had no right to be absent while your son was alive. Catherine shot back. No right to value silver over family, profit over presence. You killed Thomas with your negligence. I know. Beau's roar echoed through the house. I know I killed him. I know every second of every day that my son died, because I cared more about ledgers than his laughter. I know, Catherine. I've lived with that knowledge for 20 years, and it's eaten me alive from the inside. The house fell silent. Then footsteps, running feet, and Lottie burst into the study, her face pale, Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest. Behind her came Junior, looking alert and concerned. Mr. Beau. Lottie's voice was small, frightened. Why are you shouting? Beau's anger drained away, replaced by shame. He knelt down, opened his arms, and Lottie ran into them, seeking the comfort he'd somehow learned to provide. I'm sorry, little bit, he whispered into her hair. I didn't mean to scare you. Junior looked between his parents, seeing the letter on the desk, understanding crossing his face. Mother, what's happening? Catherine wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Your father found the letter. The one I wrote before. She couldn't finish. Before Thomas died, Junior completed. He crossed to the desk, picked up the letter, read it quickly. His face remained impassive, but Beau saw his jaw tighten, saw the pain in his eyes. You knew about me before the accident. Yes, and you left because you thought father would fail me too. I left because I knew he would, Catherine said, then immediately regretted the words. No, that's not. I left because I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk another child dying because his father cared more about money than life. Junior set down the letter carefully. And did you tell him? After you left, did you tell him he had another son? No. Why not? Catherine's face crumpled. Because I was angry. Because I wanted him to hurt. Because I convinced myself that he didn't deserve to know, that you were better off without him. That wasn't your choice to make. Junior said quietly. He was my father. I had a right to know him. I was protecting you. You were punishing him, Junior corrected. Using me as a weapon in your grief and anger. I understand why, I do. But that doesn't make it right. The words hung in the air. A judgment from a son who'd been kept from his father for 19 years. Catherine looked stricken, and Beau felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for her. They'd both been wrong, both been broken, both made terrible choices in the depths of grief. None of this matters now, Beau said finally, still holding Lottie close. What's done is done. The question is, what we do next. What can we do? Catherine asked. We can't undo 20 years. No, but we can choose how we move forward. Beau looked at Junior. Your mother kept you from me because she thought I'd fail you. She was probably right. The man I was then would have failed you. But I'm trying to be better now. Trying to be the father I should have been to Thomas, the father Lottie deserves, the father, his voice caught, the father you might have wanted if you'd known me. Junior was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice steady. I didn't come to Montana expecting a perfect reunion. Mother told me about Thomas, about your grief, about everything that went wrong. I came because, he paused, because I wanted to understand where I came from. Wanted to know if the blood that runs through my veins is cursed or blessed. And now that you're here, Beau asked, what do you think? I think you're a man who made terrible mistakes and is trying to atone for them. I think you love Lottie in a way that suggests you've learned from losing Thomas. I think, he looked at his mother, I think you both loved each other once, and maybe still do, beneath all the pain and anger. Junior, Catherine began, but he held up his hand. I'm not saying you should reconcile. I'm not saying the past can be forgotten or forgiven easily. I'm just saying that maybe we can be a family despite our wounds. A broken family, but still a family. Lottie had been quiet through this exchange, but now she spoke up. That's what families are, aren't they? People who love each other even when they're broken. The simplicity of her observation cut through the complexity of adult emotions. Beau looked down at her, then up at Junior and Catherine, seeing the possibility, fragile and uncertain but real, of healing. "I'd like that," Beau said. "To be a family, broken pieces and all." Catherine's lip trembled. "I don't know if I can—" "No one's asking you to decide tonight," Beau interrupted. "We have time, do we?" Junior asked. "What about Crane's men watching the ranch? What about the danger Lottie is in?" The question brought them back to the immediate crisis. Beau gently set Lottie aside and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "They're still out there, waiting for their moment." "Then we need to act first," Junior said. "We need to force Crane to show his hand in a way we can document." "How?" Catherine asked. A plan was forming in Beau's mind, dangerous but potentially effective. "We set a trap. We let Crane think he's won, that Lottie is vulnerable. And when he makes his move, we're ready with witnesses and evidence." "You want to use Lottie as bait," Catherine said, her voice cold. "I want to end this," Beau corrected. "Before anyone else dies." "No," Catherine said firmly. "Absolutely not. I won't allow you to put that child in danger." "She's already in danger," Beau pointed out. "Crane knows where she is. He knows she's the only witness who can destroy him. He'll come for her eventually. I'm just suggesting we choose when and where, and if something goes wrong." "If Crane succeeds, then I die protecting her," Beau said simply. "Along with every man on this ranch who's sworn to keep her safe." Junior nodded slowly. "It's risky, but Father's right. We can't just wait for Crane to strike. We need to control the situation." "This is insane," Catherine protested. "You've just met your father and now you're willing to die for his plan?" "I'm willing to die protecting an innocent child from a murderer," Junior corrected. "That's not Father's plan. That's basic human decency." Lottie tugged on Beau's sleeve. "Mr. Beau, I don't want anyone to die because of me." Beau knelt again, taking her small hands in his. "No one is going to die. We're going to be smart, careful, and we're going to end this threat once and for all. Can you trust me?" She searched his face, those dark eyes seeing everything. "I trust you? Good, because I need you to be brave one more time. Can you do that?" She nodded, clutching Mr. Buttons tighter. Maria appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with worry. "Forgive me for listening, but you're going to use the Nina as bait." "Mr. Beau, this is too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous, Maria," Beau said, echoing his earlier words. "But doing nothing is most dangerous of all." He turned back to Junior and Catherine. "Here's what we'll do. Tomorrow, we let it be known in town that I'm taking Lottie to Helena to meet with the federal marshal. We'll make a big show of preparation, make sure Crane's spies see everything. We'll set out at dawn with a wagon, a few guards, enough to look legitimate but not enough to prevent an ambush. And then?" Junior asked. "Then we wait for Crane to make his move. When he does, we'll have our own men hidden and ready. We'll document everything, witnesses, evidence, the whole attempt. It'll be enough to hang Crane and everyone involved." "This plan has too many ways to go wrong," Catherine said. "Every plan does," Beau replied. "But I'd rather act than hide, rather fight than run. And I'd rather risk everything to protect Lottie than live knowing I let another child die through my inaction." The words silenced Catherine. She looked at Beau, really looked at him, and he wondered what she saw. The broken man she'd left? The negligent father who'd lost their son? Or someone new, someone shaped by grief into something harder but maybe, just maybe, better? "If we do this," Catherine said slowly, "I'm coming too. If my son is risking his life, I'll be there." "Mother, no," Junior protested. "This isn't negotiable," Catherine said firmly. "We do this together or we don't do it at all." Beau nodded. "Together, then?" "As a family." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning and possibility. They weren't a normal family, were fractured and wounded and uncertain, but they were all they had, and sometimes that was enough. Old Pete entered the study, his face grim. "Boss, the watchers are moving. Looks like they're settling in for the night, making a camp about a mile out. They're planning something." "Good," Beau said. "Let them plan. We'll be ready." As everyone dispersed to prepare, Junior to check weapons, Catherine to pray, Maria to cook comfort food, Beau found himself alone with Lottie again. "Are you scared?" she asked him. "Terrified," he admitted. "Me too." She paused. "But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we found each other." Beau pulled her into his arms, this small girl who'd saved him from himself, who'd given him purpose when he'd lost all meaning. "I'm glad too, little bit. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know you gave me back my life. You made me remember what it means to love, to care about something more than survival. You did the same for me," she whispered. They stayed like that, holding each other against the coming storm, finding strength in their unlikely bond. Tomorrow would bring danger and possibly death. But tonight they had each other, and for now that was enough. Dawn broke cold and grey over the Thatcher ranch, mist clinging to the valleys like smoke from yesterday's battles. Beau stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hands, watching the eastern horizon lighten with the methodical patience of a man preparing for war. He hadn't slept. Instead, he'd spent the night in his study, surrounded by artifacts of his past and present: Thomas's journal, Lottie's drawings, Catherine's letter, the silver pocket watch that had marked time through 20 years of grief. And something else, something he hadn't looked at in 3 decades, his old cavalry medal, tarnished and forgotten in a locked drawer beneath ledgers and business documents. He pulled it out now, letting it dangle from its faded ribbon. The medal bore the inscription, "For Valor in Combat, Arizona Territory, 1875. He'd been 23 then, a young soldier who'd fought Apache raiders with more courage than sense. The skills he'd learned, tracking, tactical planning, combat strategy, had seemed irrelevant in the years since, buried beneath layers of business acumen and grief-induced isolation. But yesterday, holding that medal, feeling its weight, those skills had come rushing back. The ability to read terrain, to anticipate enemy movements, to turn disadvantage into advantage through superior positioning and planning. He'd been a warrior once, before he became a businessman. Now he needed to be both. Old Pete found him there, the medal still in his hand. The foreman's eyes widened with recognition. "I'll be damned," Pete said softly. "Captain Thatcher, I wondered if you'd remember." "You knew?" Beau asked. "Known since the day I came to work here 30 years ago. Checked your background, found your service record. You were something of a legend in certain circles, the ghost captain they called you. The officer who could track anything, turn any ambush, win battles everyone else said were lost." Pete's weathered face creased with approval. "I served under you for 6 months before you mustered out. You probably don't remember. I was just another private in a company of 60 men. Beau studied Pete with new eyes. "You never said anything. Wasn't my place. You'd left that life behind, built something different. I respected that." Pete paused. "But now you're dusting off the old skills, aren't you? Planning this like a military operation." "I'm planning this like a man who can't afford to lose," Beau corrected. "Crane has experience in violence, has men who kill for money. I need every advantage. Then you need to know some of the ranch hands are veterans too. Martinez served in the Mexican cavalry. Roberts was a sharpshooter in the war. Young Danny might look like a kid, but he was a scout in the Indian wars. Knows tracking better than anyone I've ever seen." Beau's pulse quickened. "You've been assembling a force without my knowledge." "I've been hiring good men who know how to handle themselves in a fight," Pete said. "Seemed prudent, given the circumstances. Does Maria know about your past service?" "She knows everything," Pete said with a slight smile. "That woman has eyes in the back of her head and ears that hear whispers in the next county." As if summoned by her name, Maria appeared with a breakfast tray. "You need to eat, Mr. Beau. Can't fight on an empty stomach." "I can't eat when—" "You will eat," she interrupted firmly, "or you'll insult my cooking." And that's something even Marcus Crane hasn't done. Despite the tension, Beau found himself smiling. He took the tray. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, everything prepared exactly as he liked, and Maria's expression softened. "The Nina is still sleeping," she reported. "Mrs. Catherine is with her, watching over her like a hawk. And young Beau is in the barn with the men, checking weapons and making plans like he was born to it." "He's a good man," Beau said. "Catherine raised him well." "She did," Maria agreed. "But he has your courage, your strategic mind. Blood will tell, even when years stand between father and son. After breakfast, Beau gathered everyone in the main room. Catherine, Junior, Pete, Maria, and the 5 ranch hands Pete trusted most. Lottie was to remain upstairs, spared the details of the dangerous plan. "Here's the situation," Beau began, spreading a hand-drawn map of the surrounding territory on the table. "Crane's men are watching us from here," he pointed to a spot a mile north, waiting for an opportunity. "We're going to give them one." He outlined the plan, a heavily publicized trip to Helena with minimal guards, designed to draw Crane into an ambush attempt. But hidden in the woods would be their own men, positioned to observe and intervene when necessary. "The goal isn't to kill Crane's men," Beau emphasized. "It's to capture them, make them testify. We need living witnesses who can connect Crane directly to attempted murder." Junior studied the map with the same intensity Beau had noticed in himself at that age. "The most likely ambush point is here," he indicated a narrow pass about 5 miles from the ranch, where the road cuts through Devil's Canyon. "Limited visibility, steep walls, perfect for an attack." "Agreed," Beau said. "Which is why we'll have men positioned on the canyon rim before we enter. Martinez, you're the best shot. You'll take the north rim with Roberts. Cover us, but don't fire unless absolutely necessary. Pete, you and Danny will be on the south rim. Your job is observation and documentation. We need you to see everything, remember every detail." "What about me?" Junior asked. Beau hesitated. Every instinct screamed to keep his son safe, away from danger. But Junior was a man grown, and more importantly, he'd proven himself capable and courageous. "You'll be in the wagon with me," Beau decided. "Driving. If shooting starts, your job is to get Lottie to safety while I provide cover." "And me?" Catherine asked. "You stay here where it's safe?" "Absolutely not," Catherine interrupted. "If my daughter is in that wagon, I'm there too." "Daughter." The word stopped everyone. Catherine looked surprised at herself, then defiant. "Yes, daughter. Lottie might not be my blood, but she's part of this family now. And I won't let her face danger while I hide in safety." Beau saw the determination in her eyes, the same fierce protectiveness she'd shown with Thomas. Arguing would be pointless. "Fine, you'll be in the wagon too, hidden under blankets with Lottie. If things go wrong, you protect her with your life." Catherine nodded, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. Maria cleared her throat. "And what about me?" "You think I'm too old to help?" "You're the reserve force," Beau said. "If we don't return by nightfall, you ride to Helena and bring the federal marshal, even if it takes days. You're our insurance policy." The plan was risky, filled with variables and potential disasters. But it was better than waiting, better than letting Crane choose the time and place of confrontation. "We leave at dawn tomorrow," Beau announced. "That gives us today to prepare, to position our men, to make sure everything is perfect." "Questions?" "What if Crane doesn't take the bait?" Junior asked. "Then we've lost nothing but a day's travel." "But I don't think he'll resist. He's been watching us, waiting for vulnerability. We're about to give him exactly what he wants, or what he thinks he wants." The meeting dispersed, everyone moving to their assigned tasks. Beau found himself alone with Catherine for the first time since the previous night's revelations. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I can hire a woman from town to ride with Lottie, someone less what? Less invested, less caring." Catherine shook her head. "I meant what I said, Beau. She's my daughter now, just as much as if I'd given birth to her. I won't abandon her the way I abandoned—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "The way you abandoned Junior." "The way I abandoned both of you," Catherine corrected. "I ran from grief instead of facing it. I chose anger over love, punishment over healing. I won't make that mistake again." Beau reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver pocket watch. "I want Junior to have this, but I think you should be the one to give it to him. To explain what it means, why it matters." Catherine took the watch, her hands trembling. "To my son, may time heal all wounds," she read. "Has it healed the wounds?" "No," Beau said honestly. "But it's made space for new growth around them, like a tree growing around an old injury. The wound is still there, but life continues anyway." "That's surprisingly poetic for a businessman." "I'm not a businessman anymore," Beau said. "I'm not sure what I am except a father trying to protect his family." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Beau, for everything, for keeping Junior from you, for leaving when you needed me, for all the years we lost to pride and grief. I'm sorry, too. For being absent when Thomas was alive, for driving you away, for not fighting harder to keep our family together." He paused. "But we have a chance now, not to undo the past, but to build something new, something better. If we survive tomorrow." "When we survive tomorrow," Beau corrected. "I didn't survive Thomas's death and 20 years of grief just to die in a canyon ambush. I have too much left to do, too much family to love." Catherine stepped closer, and for a moment Beau thought she might embrace him. But she simply reached out and straightened his collar, a wifely gesture from another lifetime. "You've changed," she said softly. "The man I married would have charged into battle without thinking of consequences. This man plans, considers, protects. I learned the hard way that charging forward without thought leads to tragedy." She nodded, withdrew her hand. "I should go check on Lottie. And give this to Junior." She held up the watch. "He should have it before tomorrow, just in case." Beau watched her go, then turned his attention to the final preparations. Weapons needed cleaning, ammunition needed counting, horses needed preparing. The mundane details of warfare that meant the difference between success and failure. Junior found him in the armory, methodically checking each rifle. The young man picked up a Winchester, examined it with the ease of someone familiar with firearms. "Mother told me about the watch," Junior said. "About what it means. Do you want it?" "I'm honored to have it," Junior said carefully. "But I'm also wondering, is this some kind of goodbye? Are you planning to die tomorrow?" "I'm planning to live," Beau corrected. "But in war, good plans often go wrong. I want you to have the watch regardless of what happens. It was meant for Thomas. It was meant for my son," Beau said. "I have 2 sons, one I'll carry in my heart forever, and one standing in front of me. You both deserve to know you're valued, loved, remembered." Junior was quiet for a moment, turning the rifle over in his hands. "I came to Montana angry," he finally said. "Angry that I had a father who didn't know I existed. Angry that Mother kept us apart. Angry at the whole mess of it. But now," he looked up, met Beau's eyes. "Now I'm just grateful. Grateful to know you, to understand where I came from, to have a chance at family, even if it's complicated and broken." "The best families usually are," Beau said. They worked in companionable silence for a while, father and son preparing for battle like generations of men before them. Beau found himself teaching Junior the small tricks of combat readiness, how to ensure a rifle wouldn't jam, how to position ammunition for quick reloading, how to move in ways that minimized noise and maximized efficiency. "You were a soldier," Junior observed. "Mother never mentioned that." "She probably didn't know the details. I didn't talk about it much. Seemed like another lifetime." "What kind of soldier?" "Cavalry. Fought in the Apache Wars. Learned to track and fight in terrain like this. The skills fade with disuse, but they never entirely disappear." Junior nodded slowly. "That's where I get it from, then. The strategic thinking, the comfort with weapons. I always wondered why I took to military tactics so easily, why the academy came so naturally." "Academy?" "Military preparatory school back east. Mother enrolled me when I was 16, said I needed discipline and direction. I excelled, was offered a commission when I graduated. Almost took it, but," he shrugged, "Mother needed me more than the army did." Another sacrifice Catherine had made, Beau realized. Keeping Junior close instead of letting him pursue his calling because she'd already lost too much family. "After this is over," Beau said. "If the commission is still available—" "It's not," Junior interrupted. "I chose business instead. Figured I'd make Mother proud by building something, creating wealth and security. Following in your footsteps, ironically enough, without even knowing you. And has it made you happy?" "Business?" Junior laughed, but there was no humor in it. "About as happy as it made you, I'd guess." Which is to say, not at all. The admission hung between them, a recognition of shared dissatisfaction, inherited restlessness. "What would make you happy?" Beau asked. Junior thought about it, really considered the question. "This," he finally said. Being here, being part of something that matters. Protecting Lottie isn't about profit or advancement. It's about doing what's right. That feels good, feels real in a way business never has. Then stay, Beau said impulsively. After this is over, stay here. Help me run the ranch, protect the valley, build something worth having instead of just something worth money. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and good. I know you're my son, and I've missed 19 years of watching you grow. Don't make me miss any more. Junior's eyes shone with unshed tears. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. They clasped hands, then embraced, awkward and unpracticed, but real. A father and son, finding each other after years of separation, connected by blood and battle and the simple desire to be family. That evening, Beau called Lottie to his study for a private conversation. She came clutching Mr. Buttons, her face grave with the understanding that tomorrow would be dangerous. I have something for you, Beau said, pulling out the wooden horse he'd carved. It was finished now, sanded smooth and painted with careful detail. A Palomino mare, head high and proud, frozen in mid-gallop. Lottie's eyes went wide. You made this? For me, I did. I thought, Beau's voice caught. I thought you should have something beautiful to remember, regardless of what happens tomorrow. Nothing bad will happen, Lottie said with childish certainty. You'll protect me. You promised. I'll try my best. But Lottie, if something does go wrong, if somehow Crane gets past all our defenses, I need you to promise me something. What? Run, don't try to be brave, don't try to fight. Just run as fast as you can, and don't look back. Can you promise me that? She clutched the wooden horse to her chest, her lower lip trembling. I don't want to lose you too. I don't want to be alone again. Beau pulled her into his lap, holding her close. You won't be alone. You'll have Catherine and Junior, Maria and Pete. You'll have a whole family who loves you. But I want you, she whispered. You're my Mr. Beau, my father. The word father hit Beau like a physical blow. She'd never called him that before. Had always maintained the slight distance of Mr. Beau, but now, on the eve of battle, she was claiming him as truly hers. And you're my daughter, he said, his voice rough with emotion. My little bit. Nothing will change that, not distance, not danger, not even death. You're mine and I'm yours, and that's forever, she cried then, great heaving sobs that shook her small frame. Beau held her through it, rocking gently, making promises he prayed he could keep. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. The wooden horse, does it have a name? Beau smiled. I thought you might name it. She studied the carving, turning it over in her hands. Hope, she decided. I'll call her Hope, because that's what you gave me. Hope that families can heal, that broken people can love again, that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. Hope, Beau repeated. That's perfect. As twilight fell, the household gathered for what might be their last meal together. Maria had outdone herself, preparing everyone's favorites, tamales for Junior, apple pie for Catherine, roast chicken for Beau, and special cookies for Lottie. The table was crowded with food and family, laughter mixing with underlying tension as they tried to pretend tomorrow was just another day. But when the meal ended and everyone retired to their rooms, the pretense fell away. Beau lay in his bed, listening to the house settle around him, hearing Catherine's soft crying from the guest room, Junior's restless pacing in Thomas's old nursery, Lottie's whispered prayers to parents who could no longer answer. He rose, finally, unable to bear the isolation, and found himself drawn to Thomas's shrine room. The candles were lit, Maria's doing, he suspected, and the photographs seemed to glow in the flickering light. I'm going into battle tomorrow, son, Beau whispered to the image of his lost boy. Going to protect a little girl, the way I failed to protect you. I'm scared I'll fail again, scared I'll lose another child to my mistakes. But I have to try. You understand that, don't you? I have to try to do better. The photograph offered no answer, but Beau felt a strange peace settle over him. Whatever happened tomorrow, he was facing it as a father, as a protector, as a man trying to redeem himself through action, rather than drowning in regret. He was still standing there when Catherine found him, wrapped in her shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders like it used to be when they were young. "I couldn't sleep either," she said. Joining him in front of Thomas's shrine, they stood in silence, former lovers separated by grief and time, united by the child they'd lost and the children they were trying to save. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Catherine said finally, "I want you to know I did love you. I still love the man you were, the man you might have been, and maybe in some way the man you've become." "Catherine, don't," she interrupted. "Don't say anything. Just survive tomorrow, protect our children, and maybe when this is over we can figure out what we are to each other. Now." She kissed his cheek, a ghost of affection from another lifetime, and left him alone with his memories and his prayers. Beau touched his cheek where her lips had been, feeling the faint warmth, the promise of possibility. Tomorrow would bring violence and danger, would test everything he'd built and learned and become. But it would also bring clarity, resolution, an end to the threat that had shadowed them all. He checked his weapons one final time, positioned them for easy access, and finally allowed himself a few hours of sleep. Not deep, not restful, but enough to be ready when dawn came, and come it did. Cold and grey and full of promise, both of victory and disaster, hope and heartbreak, life and death. The war was beginning, and Beau Thatcher was ready to fight. The wagon rattled along the mountain road as first light painted the peaks orange and gold. Beau held the reins with practiced ease, Junior beside him on the driver's bench, rifles positioned within easy reach. Behind them, hidden beneath blankets and supplies, Catherine and Lottie lay silent and still. The morning air carried the scent of pine and possibility. Beau's senses were heightened, every sound amplified. The creak of wagon wheels, the jingle of harnesses, the soft breathing of horses pushing through morning mist. Old Pete and Danny were already positioned on the South Canyon rim. Martinez and Roberts had taken the north side hours before dawn. Everything was in place. "They're following us," Junior said quietly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his attention on sounds behind them. 3 riders, maybe 4, staying back but keeping pace. Beau had noticed them too. "Right on schedule. Crane doesn't disappoint. You sound almost pleased." "I'm pleased we're finally ending this. One way or another, today Lottie will be safe." Devil's Canyon loomed ahead, its steep walls rising like tombstones on either side of the narrow road. The perfect ambush point, just as they'd predicted. Beau felt his cavalry training kick in, reading terrain, calculating angles of fire, identifying cover and escape routes. The skills came back like muscle memory, sharp and clear, despite 30 years of disuse. "Get ready," he murmured to Junior. "Catherine, Lottie, stay down and stay quiet no matter what happens." A muffled acknowledgement came from beneath the blankets. Beau's hand moved to the rifle beside him, not drawing it but ready. Junior did the same. The wagon entered the canyon, shadows swallowing them as the high walls blocked the early sun. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant, and Beau's breath misted in the cold air. Every nerve in his body sang with tension. They made it halfway through before the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the wagon bed, splintering wood inches from where Catherine and Lottie hid. Junior grabbed the rifle as Beau hauled on the reins, bringing the horses to a controlled stop rather than letting them bolt. "Federal warrant!" Junior shouted, his voice carrying authority that surprised Beau. "Drop your weapons and surrender!" Laughter echoed from the canyon walls, cold, mocking. Then Crane himself stepped into view, emerging from behind a boulder with 3 armed men flanking him. Dalton was there, his scarred face twisted in a cruel smile. The other 2 were strangers to Beau, but their bearing marked them as professional killers. "Federal warrant?" Crane sneered. "Boy, you're a long way from any federal authority. Out here, I am the law." Beau's hand tightened on his rifle, but he didn't raise it. Not yet. "This is your last chance, Crane. Stand down before this gets worse." "Worse for who?" Crane's eyes flicked to the wagon bed. "I know she's in there, the Henderson girl. The only witness who can tie me to those unfortunate accidents. Once she's gone, there's no evidence, no case, no problem." "There are other witnesses," Beau bluffed. "People who've testified about your land acquisitions, your violence, your murders." "All dead," Crane said casually. "Billy Morrison won't be testifying from the bottom of the river." Sarah Mackenzie had a tragic fall down her stairs after she started asking questions. Old Tom Bradley's barn fire was most unfortunate. I've been very thorough, Thatcher. The casual admission of multiple murders made Beau's blood run cold. But it also confirmed what he'd suspected. Crane was beyond reason, beyond redemption. This would end in blood. Last chance, Beau repeated. Surrender now or face the consequences. Crane laughed again. You're outnumbered and outgunned. I have 4 men to your 2, and that's assuming the women don't count. The math is simple, Thatcher. Give me the girl, and maybe I'll let the rest of you live. No! The word hung in the cold air, absolute and final. Crane's smile faded. Then you'll die with her. Dalton, the scarred man, raised his rifle, aiming at the wagon bed. Time seemed to slow, and Beau saw everything with perfect clarity, the finger tightening on the trigger, the angle of the barrel, the trajectory that would send a bullet into Lottie's hiding place. Beau moved without conscious thought, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. His bullet took Dalton in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his shot wild into the canyon wall. Junior fired a heartbeat later, forcing Crane to dive for cover. Then all hell broke loose. Crane's other men opened fire, bullets pinging off the wagon, digging into dirt, whining as they ricocheted off stone. Beau dropped from the driver's bench, using the wagon as cover, returning fire with the methodical precision of his cavalry days. Junior was beside him, his shooting steady despite his youth. The boy, the man, had training, had skill, had courage that made Beau's heart swell with pride, even in the midst of chaos. From above, Martinez and Roberts opened fire from the canyon rim, their bullets forcing Crane's men to split their attention, to seek cover, to lose the advantage of surprise. Get them out. Beau shouted to Junior, covering his son as the younger man scrambled into the wagon bed. Junior threw back the blankets to reveal Catherine and Lottie huddled together, terrified but unharmed. Come on, we need to move. Beau laid down covering fire as Junior helped first Lottie, then Catherine from the wagon. They scrambled toward a cluster of boulders that offered better protection than the exposed wagon. A bullet grazed Beau's shoulder, burning like a brand. He ignored it, focusing on keeping Crane's men pinned down while his family reached safety. Blood soaked through his shirt, but his hands remained steady, his aim true. Dalton, wounded but still dangerous, had found cover behind a fallen log. He was trying to flank them, working his way around the boulders where Catherine and Lottie hid. Beau saw the movement, understood the intent. He broke from cover, charging across open ground with a rebel yell that would have made his old cavalry unit proud. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet, one tugging at his coat, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Dalton was threatening his family, and Beau would die before he let that stand. He crashed into Dalton just as the scarred man was raising his rifle toward Lottie's hiding place. They went down in a tangle of limbs, the rifle clattering away across rocks. Dalton was younger, stronger, but Beau fought with the desperation of a father protecting his children. They rolled across the ground, each seeking advantage, fists and elbows doing damage that bullets had missed. Beau felt ribs crack, his or Dalton's, he couldn't tell, felt blood running into his eyes, felt pain that he pushed aside through sheer will. Dalton's hand found a rock, swung it toward Beau's head. Beau caught the wrist, twisted, heard bones snap. Dalton screamed and Beau pressed his advantage, finally getting on top, his hands around the scarred man's throat. "You killed the Hendersons," Beau growled. "Killed them for land and profit." Dalton's face turned purple, his one good hand scrabbling at Beau's iron grip. Crane ordered, "I know, and you'll testify to that. You'll tell a judge and jury exactly what you did, or I'll finish what I started." Dalton nodded frantically, and Beau eased his grip slightly. The scarred man gasped for air, then whispered, "Behind you!" Beau turned to see Crane himself, rifle raised, aiming directly at him. Time froze. Beau saw his death in Crane's eyes, saw the finger tightening on the trigger, saw the end of everything he'd built and hoped for. Then Junior appeared, tackling Crane from the side. The rifle fired, but the bullet went wide, shattering against stone. Father and son, Crane and Beau's Jr. tumbled across the ground in a deadly embrace. Beau released Dalton and scrambled for a weapon. But Junior was already fighting with a fury that spoke of 19 years of questions. 19 years of absence, 19 years of being denied his father. He fought not just for survival, but for family, for belonging, for the right to be Beau Thatcher's son. Crane was older, more experienced, but Junior had youth and righteous anger on his side. They traded blows that echoed off canyon walls, a brutal dance that could only end one way. Martinez's rifle cracked from above, taking out one of Crane's remaining men. Roberts got the other. Suddenly it was just Crane and Dalton against the Thatcher family and their allies. Old Pete and Danny appeared at the canyon entrance, rifles ready, cutting off escape. Sheriff Collins rode in behind them. Collins, who'd been weak but not entirely corrupt, who'd finally chosen a side. "It's over, Crane," Collins shouted. "Federal Marshal is on his way. Surrender now or we'll take you by force." Crane looked around, seeing his trap turned against him, his men dead or captured, his empire crumbling. His eyes found Lottie still hiding behind the boulders, and something cold and final entered his expression. "If I'm going down," he snarled, "I'm taking her with me." He broke from Junior, moving with desperate speed toward Lottie's position. Beau raised his rifle but couldn't get a clean shot. Junior was too close, the angle wrong. Catherine screamed, throwing herself in front of Lottie, putting her body between the child and Crane's murderous intent. Time seemed to slow again as Crane raised his pistol, aiming at Catherine, at Lottie, at everything Beau loved. Beau's finger tightened on the trigger, but he was too far, the angle too difficult, the risk of hitting Catherine too great. Then a small figure emerged from behind the boulders. Lottie, 7 years old and terrified, stood up to face the man who'd murdered her parents. In her hands was the wooden horse Beau had carved for her. Hope, she'd named it. She held it like a talisman, like a shield, like everything good and pure in a world gone mad. "No," she shouted, her voice high and clear. "You can't hurt my family anymore." Crane hesitated, momentarily startled by this small girl's defiance. It was only a second, barely a heartbeat, but it was enough. Beau's rifle spoke, the shot echoing off canyon walls like thunder. The bullet took Crane in the chest, spinning him around, the pistol falling from nerveless fingers to clatter on stone. Crane's eyes went wide with surprise, then pain, then nothing at all as he crumpled to the ground. The man who'd killed so many, who'd destroyed families for profit, who'd terrorized an entire valley, lay still and silent in the dust. The canyon fell quiet, except for ragged breathing and the soft sound of Lottie crying. Beau lowered his rifle, his hands shaking now that the immediate threat had passed. Junior stood over Crane's body, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his chest heaving with exertion. Sheriff Collins dismounted, walking slowly to Crane's corpse. He knelt, checked for a pulse, then looked up at Beau. "He's dead. Self-defense," old Pete called from his position. We all saw it. Crane was about to murder the girl and Mrs. Thatcher. "Witnessed," Martinez confirmed from the canyon rim. Collins nodded slowly. "I'll need statements from everyone, but—" He paused, looking at Crane's body with something like relief. "This valley will sleep easier tonight." Beau wasn't listening. He was moving toward Lottie, who still stood frozen in place, clutching her wooden horse, tears streaming down her face. He dropped to his knees before her, checking for injuries, for blood, for any sign that Crane had harmed her. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You saved me." "You kept your promise." Beau pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he feared he might hurt her. But he couldn't let go, couldn't release this small girl who'd become his whole world. Catherine was there too, embracing them both, and then Junior joined them. And they were all tangled together, a family forged in fire and blood, broken pieces that had somehow become whole. "It's over," Beau whispered into Lottie's hair. "It's finally over." The ride back to the ranch was conducted in near silence, everyone too exhausted, too emotionally drained to speak. Beau drove with Junior beside him again, but this time Catherine and Lottie sat between them, visible and safe, no longer hiding beneath blankets. Dalton, wounded and defeated, was bound in the wagon bed under Pete's watchful guard. The scarred man would testify. would tell everything in exchange for leniency. Crane's empire of violence and corruption would be exposed, the stolen lands returned, the victims' families compensated. Justice, Beau thought. Finally, justice. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed it, and his ribs ached from the fight with Dalton. But these pains felt distant, unimportant. What mattered was the small girl pressed against his side, the woman sitting close enough that their legs touched, the son driving with careful competence. Family. He had family again. Maria met them at the ranch, tears of relief streaming down her weathered face when she saw them all alive and whole. She fussed over wounds, demanded explanations, scolded them for taking such risks, even as she thanked God for their safe return. The federal marshal arrived 2 days later, taking Dalton into custody and documenting everything: the drawings, the testimony, the evidence of Crane's systematic murder and land theft. The investigation would continue, he assured them, but the threat was over. Lottie was safe. As the marshal rode away, Beau found himself on the porch with the silver pocket watch in his hand. Junior approached, his eyes still blackened from the fight but healing. "You wanted me to have this," Junior said, nodding at the watch. Beau opened it, read the inscription one more time. "To my son, may time heal all wounds." He looked up at Junior. "Your mother and I, we've wasted so much time. 20 years of wounds that might have healed if we'd had the courage to face them together. Time hasn't entirely run out," Junior observed. "We're still here, still have years ahead of us, if we choose to use them wisely." Beau extended the watch. "This was meant for Thomas on his 8th birthday. He never got to see it. But maybe it can mean something new now. A reminder that time is precious, that every moment with family matters, that wounds can heal if we let them." Junior took the watch, turning it over in his hands. The silver caught the afternoon light, gleaming like hope itself. "I'll treasure it," he said simply. "Not just for what it was meant to be, but for what it represents now. A father and son finding each other across the years." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the western peaks. Then Junior spoke again, his voice tentative. "I've been thinking about your offer. To stay here, to help run the ranch, He paused. "To be part of this family permanently." Beau's heart hammered. "And her mother and I have been talking. About the past, about the future, about everything." Junior met his father's eyes. "She's not ready to remarry you. Maybe she never will be. The wounds are too deep, the history too complicated." Beau nodded, having expected as much. "I understand." "But," Junior continued, "she's willing to stay, to build something new here, not as your wife, but as family. We'd have separate houses on the property, separate lives but connected. Is that something you could accept?" "Yes," Beau said without hesitation. "I'll take whatever she's willing to give, whatever you're both willing to give. Just having you here, being part of your lives, that's more than I dared hope for." Junior smiled, the expression transforming his face from serious young man to the boy he might have been if circumstances had been different. "Then we'll stay. Mother wants to open a school in Calico Ridge, says the valley needs proper education. I thought I might help you expand the ranch, maybe work on restoring lands to the families Crane displaced." "That's good work," Beau approved. "Important work. And Lottie," Junior's smile widened. "She's already declared herself my little sister. I hope that's all right." "More than all right," Beau said, his throat tight. "She needs a big brother." "You both need each other." As if summoned by her name, Lottie appeared around the corner of the house, the wooden horse, Hope, clutched in one hand and a new drawing in the other. She ran to them, her face lit with excitement. "Look what I drew!" she exclaimed, holding up the paper. It showed the ranch house with 4 figures standing in front, Beau and Lottie holding hands, Junior beside them, and Catherine in the doorway. But there was a 5th figure too, translucent and smiling, standing behind them all. Thomas, Beau realized. She'd drawn Thomas watching over his family. "It's beautiful," Beau managed, his voice thick. "It's us," Lottie said simply. "All of us. Even the ones we can't see but know are there." Catherine emerged from the house, saw them gathered together looking at the drawing, and her expression softened. She descended the porch steps and joined them, completing the picture Lottie had created. "I've made a decision," Catherine announced, her voice steady. "I'm staying in Montana. Not in this house. I can't live here again, not with Thomas's ghost in every room, but in the valley. Junior will build me a home on the east pasture, close enough to be family, but far enough to be my own woman." "I understand," Beau said. "Do you?" Catherine challenged. "Do you understand that I'm staying not for you, but for them?" She gestured to Junior and Lottie. "They need family, need stability, need—" Her voice caught. "They need what we should have given Thomas, but didn't." "I know," Beau agreed. "And I'll take it. Whatever terms you set, whatever boundaries you need, I'll accept them all just to have you near." Catherine studied him with those sharp eyes that saw everything. "You really have changed, haven't you? The Beau I married would have demanded reconciliation, would have pushed for what he wanted regardless of what I needed. The Beau you married was a fool," Beau said quietly. "Took me 20 years and a 7-year-old girl to figure that out." A ghost of a smile crossed Catherine's face. Maybe in time we can be friends. Maybe even more than that eventually. But not now. Not yet. I'll wait," Beau promised. "I've gotten good at waiting." Lottie tugged on his hand. "Mr. Beau, can I ask you something?" "Always. Can I call you Papa now, instead of Mr. Beau?" Her dark eyes searched his face. "You said I'm your daughter, and daughters call their fathers Papa." The request hit Beau harder than any bullet. Papa. The name Thomas had called him, the name he'd thought he'd never hear again. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but feel the weight of that small word. "Yes," he finally managed. "Yes, little bit, you can call me Papa." She beamed and threw her arms around him. "Papa," she said, testing the word. "My Papa," Junior cleared his throat. "I suppose that makes me the oddity. Can't exactly call you Papa when I'm 19. Call me whatever you're comfortable with," Beau said. "Father, Dad, Beau, sir, I'll answer to anything as long as you're the one calling." "How about Pa?" Junior suggested. "Simple Western, appropriate for a ranch." "Pa," Beau repeated, liking the sound of it. "That works." And so they stood together as the sun set, Beau with his daughter in his arms, and his son beside him, Catherine close enough to touch, but maintaining her careful distance. Not the family he'd lost, not the family he'd dreamed of, but a family nonetheless. Broken and mended, wounded and healing, complicated and beautiful. Maria called them to dinner, and they went inside together, filling the house with voices and laughter for the first time in 20 years. Old Pete joined them, and Martinez, and even Sheriff Collins, who'd stopped by to check on them. The table was crowded, the meal simple but abundant, and Beau found himself looking around at the faces gathered there. His people, his family, his reason for everything. "I'd like to make a toast," he said. Raising his glass, everyone quieted, turned their attention to him. "To second chances," Beau began. "To families found and lost and found again. To courage in the face of fear, to justice when injustice seems inevitable, to love that survives even death." He paused, his eyes finding each person at the table. "To Thomas, who taught me what it means to be a father even if I learned the lesson too late. To Catherine, who gave me sons even when I didn't deserve them. To Junior, who forgave me for being absent. To Lottie, who saved me when I'd given up on being saved." His voice broke. "To all of you for making this house a home again." "To family," Junior echoed, raising his glass. "To family," they all repeated. The words echoing off walls that had been silent too long. They drank and ate and talked late into the night. Stories were shared, Catherine's years in Boston, Junior's childhood adventures, Lottie's memories of her parents, Beau's tales of cavalry days that had his son hanging on every word. Later, after the guests had left and Catherine and Junior had retired to the guest rooms, Beau tucked Lottie into bed. She was nearly asleep, clutching both Mr. Buttons and the wooden horse Hope, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been when she'd first arrived. "Papa," she murmured drowsily. "Yes, little bit." "Are you happy now?" Beau thought about the question, really considered it. Was he happy? He'd lost Thomas forever, had wasted 20 years in grief, had nearly lost Lottie to Crane's violence. Catherine would never fully be his again. And Junior had missed his entire childhood, but he also had this moment, this family, this second chance at life and love. "Yes," he said honestly. "I'm happy now," she smiled in her sleep, and Beau pressed a kiss to her forehead before leaving. Pulling the door nearly closed behind him, he found Catherine in the hallway, standing outside Thomas's shrine room. The candles were lit again, and she was looking at their son's photograph with an expression Beau couldn't quite read. "I thought I'd never be able to look at his picture again," she said without turning. "Thought the pain would kill me. And now I see." She paused, considering. "I see that he's still with us. Not in the way we want, but in the legacy he left. In Lottie's laughter, in Junior's courage, in your transformation from businessman to father. He's in all of it." Beau joined her, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of their lost son's image. "Do you think he'd be proud of what we've become?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "I think he'd be happy we finally figured out what matters. That it took us 20 years and another child to learn the lesson doesn't diminish it. I miss him every day." "So do I," Catherine agreed. "But maybe we can miss him together now instead of separately. Maybe shared grief is lighter than solitary suffering." Beau reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand in his. She didn't squeeze back, but she didn't let go either. They stood like that for several minutes, two people who'd loved and lost and were learning to live again, united by the child they'd buried and the children they were raising. Finally, Catherine gently extracted her hand. "Good night, Beau. Good night." "Catherine!" She left him there with Thomas's memory, and Beau blew out the candles, whispering a final prayer to a son who couldn't hear, but maybe, somehow knew. In his bedroom, he removed the cavalry medal from around his neck and placed it in the drawer beside the watch. Artifacts of war and time, both still precious, but no longer needed as daily reminders. He was a father again, a protector again, and that identity required no talismans. As he lay in bed, listening to the house settle around him, Catherine's soft movements in the guest room, Junior's steady breathing from Thomas's old nursery, Lottie's occasional murmur from down the hall, Beau felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Not the erasure of grief, but the addition of joy. Not forgetting the past, but embracing the future. He closed his eyes and slept deeply for the first time since Thomas died, knowing that when he woke, his family would be there. Imperfect, complicated, wounded, but his, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months had transformed the Thatcher ranch from a monument to grief into a celebration of life. Spring had come to the Montana Valley, painting the meadows with wildflowers and filling the air with the songs of returning birds. The ranch had never been more prosperous, more alive, more full of the sounds and sights of family. Beau stood on the porch in the early morning light, coffee steaming in his hands, watching the world wake up around him. In the distance, he could see the new house Junior had built for Catherine, a modest but elegant structure on the east pasture, far enough for independence, but close enough for family dinners 3 times a week. Smoke rose from its chimney, and Beau knew Catherine would be up, preparing for another day at the schoolhouse she'd opened in Calico Ridge. The sound of hoofbeats drew his attention. Lottie and Junior were riding in from the north pasture, racing each other across the meadow, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Lottie had become an accomplished rider under Junior's patient teaching, and the bond between them had grown into something beautiful. A big brother protecting and guiding his little sister, a little sister adoring and challenging her big brother. They pulled up at the corral, breathless and grinning. Lottie jumped down, ran to the porch and threw herself into Beau's arms. "Papa! You should have seen me. They beat Junior by 3 lengths. "She cheated," Junior protested good-naturedly, dismounting with the easy grace of a born horseman. "Started before I was ready." "Did not," Lottie giggled. "You're just slow in the morning." Beau settled Lottie on his hip, marveling as always at how natural the gesture had become. "How about we call it a tie, and you both come in for Maria's breakfast before it gets cold?" They trooped inside together, filling the house with noise and life. Maria had outdone herself. Pancakes and bacon, eggs and fresh bread, enough food for a small army. Old Pete was already at the table reading the newspaper and chuckling over some local gossip. "Says here, the railroad is rerouting around the valley," Pete announced. "Federal investigation found irregularities in the previous land acquisitions. All them families Crane drove out are getting their property back." "That's good news," Beau said, settling Lottie in her chair and pouring himself more coffee. "Justice, finally." "Crane's accomplices are still awaiting trial," Junior added, taking his own seat. "Dalton's testimony should ensure convictions across the board." The conversation flowed easily. Topics jumping from ranch business to Lottie's progress in Catherine's school to Junior's plans for expanding the herd. This had become their morning ritual. Breakfast together, plans for the day, family time before the demands of the ranch pulled them in different directions. Catherine arrived just as they were finishing, looking fresh and professional in her teaching dress, a leather satchel full of books and papers slung over her shoulder. She accepted coffee from Maria with a grateful smile and settled into the chair beside Lottie. "Good morning, family," she said, and the ease with which she said it, family, made Beau's heart swell. "Morning, Mama Cat," Lottie replied, using the nickname that had stuck despite Catherine's initial protests. They spent the day, as they spent most days now, working together and separately, crossing paths throughout the hours, always aware of each other's presence. Beau and Junior rode the fence line, checking for damage and discussing expansion plans. Lottie attended school in town with Catherine, her reading and arithmetic improving daily. Maria and Pete managed the household and ranch hands with the easy competence of people who'd been doing it for decades. But it was the evenings that Beau treasured most. After dinner, always together now, always loud with conversation and laughter, they would gather in the front parlor. Catherine would read aloud while Lottie drew, Junior would work on ranch accounts, and Beau would carve. He'd discovered a talent for woodworking that had lain dormant for years, and his pieces, horses mostly, but also birds and other animals, had begun to accumulate around the house. Tonight, as Catherine's voice wove a story from the pages of a novel, Beau worked on a special project. A family portrait, carved in relief on a large wooden panel. He'd been working on it for months, trying to capture not just likenesses, but essence, Catherine's strength, Junior's quiet courage, Lottie's resilient joy. And somewhere in the background, barely visible but unmistakably there, Thomas's gentle spirit watching over them all. "That's beautiful." "Pa," Junior said, looking over his shoulder, "you've really captured her smile." He nodded toward Lottie, who was curled in Catherine's lap, fighting sleep as she listened to the story. "She has her mother's smile," Beau said, then caught himself. "Her birth mother, I mean. She showed me a photograph once, before—" He couldn't finish. "Before they were murdered," Junior completed gently. "It's okay to say it, Pa. Acknowledging the tragedy doesn't diminish the healing. Wise beyond his years," Beau thought. Catherine had raised him well, better than Beau could have hoped to do alone. The story ended, and Catherine closed the book. "Bedtime for young ladies," she announced, gently rousing Lottie. "I'm not tired," Lottie protested, even as she yawned. "Of course not," Catherine agreed with a smile. "You're just resting your eyes. Come on, I'll tuck you in." As Catherine led Lottie upstairs, Junior set aside his paperwork and moved to sit beside Beau on the sofa. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and son, watching the fire dance in the hearth. "I got a letter from the military academy," Junior said finally. "They're offering me a teaching position. Tactical strategy and leadership." Beau's heart clenched. "Are you going to take it?" Junior was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to discuss it with you first. It would mean leaving the ranch for most of the year, only coming back for summers and holidays. But it's what you want. What would make you happy?" "I think so. I love the ranch, love being here with family. But I want to make my own mark on the world. Want to be more than just Beau Thatcher's son, you know?" Beau nodded, understanding perfectly. "You should take it. Follow your dreams, son. Lord knows I wasted too many years not following mine. You're not disappointed." "I'm proud," Beau corrected. "Proud that you found your calling. Proud that you're brave enough to pursue it. Proud that you're my son." He paused. Thomas would have been proud too. Junior's eyes shone with unshed tears. You think so? I know so. He always wanted to be a hero, wanted to help people and make the world better. You're doing that, just in a different way than he might have imagined. They clasped hands, a gesture that had become natural over the months. Then Catherine returned, and the three of them sat together, talking late into the night about Junior's opportunity, about the future, about everything and nothing. Over the following weeks, preparations were made. Junior would leave in the fall after harvest. It gave them the summer together, time to solidify bonds and create memories that would sustain them through separation. The day before Junior was to leave, a photographer came from town to take a formal family portrait. It had been Lottie's idea. She wanted a picture to remember this moment, this family, this perfect summer that had healed so many wounds. They gathered in front of the ranch house, dressed in their finest. Beau in his good suit, Catherine in a beautiful dress that reminded him of their courting days, Junior looking grown and confident, and Lottie in a new dress Maria had made specially for the occasion. The photographer positioned them carefully, Beau and Junior standing tall in the back, Catherine and Lottie seated in front. But at the last moment, Lottie insisted on rearranging them. We need to be together, she said firmly. Really together, not just standing near each other. So they shifted, Beau's hand on Junior's shoulder, Catherine's hand resting lightly on Beau's arm, Lottie in front of them all, connecting them with her small hands on each adult's knee. Perfect, the photographer declared. Now everyone smile, think of something happy. Beau didn't have to think. Looking at his family, broken and mended, lost and found, imperfect but whole. Happiness was all he felt. The flash powder exploded, capturing the moment forever. That evening, at Junior's farewell dinner, Beau stood to make a toast. The whole valley seemed to be there, ranch hands and neighbors, friends and former enemies who'd made peace. Even Sheriff Collins had come, bringing news that the last of Crane's accomplices had been convicted. A year ago, Beau began, his voice carrying across the crowded room. I was a dead man walking, rich in money, but poor in everything that mattered. I'd lost my son, my wife, my purpose. I existed but didn't live, survived but didn't thrive. Then a little girl with a tattered teddy bear came into my life and changed everything. He looked down at Lottie, who beamed up at him. She taught me that love doesn't end with loss, that families can be rebuilt, that second chances are real if we're brave enough to take them. His eyes moved to Catherine. She brought back the wife I'd driven away, gave me the chance to apologize, to explain, to maybe someday earn forgiveness. Then to Junior. She gave me a son I never knew I had, a young man of courage and conviction who honored me by calling me father, despite having every reason not to. He raised his glass. So tonight, we celebrate not just Junior's new adventure, but all the adventures that brought us here. The painful ones and the joyful ones, the losses and the findings, the endings and the beginnings. We celebrate family, not the one we're born into, but the one we choose, the one we build, the one we fight for and protect and cherish. To family, the room echoed. They drank and ate and danced late into the night. Beau waltzed with Catherine for the first time in 20 years, their steps awkward at first, but quickly finding the rhythm they'd once shared. He danced with Lottie, lifting her to stand on his boots as they spun around the floor, her laughter like music. He even danced with Maria, who scolded him for stepping on her toes while smiling fit to burst. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Beau found himself on the porch with Lottie. She was tired, leaning against him, fighting sleep. "Papa?" she murmured. "Yes, little bit. Are we always going to be this happy?" Beau thought about how to answer. He could lie, could promise that nothing bad would ever happen again. But Lottie deserved honesty. Life has ups and downs, he said carefully. We'll face challenges, experience losses, go through hard times. But as long as we face them together, as long as we love each other and hold on to hope, yes, we'll be happy. Maybe not every single moment, but in the ways that matter most. She nodded against his chest. I'm glad you bought me at that auction." The words, so simple, so profound, made Beau's eyes burn. "Best investment I ever made," he said, his voice rough. "You saved my life, Lottie. Gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. You saved mine too," she whispered. "You and Mama Cat and Junior and Maria and everyone. You're my family now, forever," Beau promised. "No matter what happens, no matter where life takes us, we're family forever." She fell asleep in his arms, and he carried her inside, up the stairs to her room. The walls were covered now with her drawings, not just the dark memories of fire and loss, but bright images of horses and family, adventures and dreams. The tattered teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, sat on the shelf beside the wooden horse Beau had carved. Both precious, both loved, both symbols of survival and hope. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Sweet dreams, my daughter." In the hallway, he found Catherine waiting. She'd been staying the night more often lately, the guest room becoming almost hers again. Not his wife, not yet, maybe never, but family nonetheless. "That was a beautiful toast," she said. "I meant every word." They stood in comfortable silence, then Catherine spoke again. "I've been thinking about something. About us, about the future." Beau's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. "And I'm not ready to be your wife again. The wounds are still too fresh, the history too complicated. But," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "but I'm not opposed to the possibility, someday, if we can continue to grow, to heal, to become the people we should have been 20 years ago. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't a promise of reconciliation. But it was hope, and hope was enough." "I'll wait," Beau said simply. "I'm good at waiting now." Catherine smiled, and for a moment she was the girl he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "I know you are. You've become patient, thoughtful, present. The man I always hoped you'd be." She kissed his cheek, a gesture that had become almost habitual over the months, and retired to her room, leaving Beau alone in the hallway with his thoughts and his gratitude. Junior left the next morning, riding away toward his new life with promises to write and visit. Beau and Lottie stood on the porch, waving until he disappeared over the horizon. Lottie cried, and Beau held her, knowing that this was part of life, letting go so that those we love can grow. The days settled into a new rhythm without Junior, quieter but no less full. Catherine continued teaching, Lottie continued learning, Beau continued building. The ranch prospered. The valley healed, and slowly, carefully, the Thatcher family wove itself back together. A month after Junior left, a package arrived. Inside was the formal family photograph, perfectly captured, professionally mounted. Beau hung it in the main hallway, replacing the lonely individual photos that had scattered through the house for 20 years. The image showed 4 people, a man weathered but content, a woman strong and beautiful, a young man on the cusp of his own adventure, and a small girl holding them all together. Their faces radiated love and belonging, healing and hope. It was imperfect. Beau's smile was tentative. Catherine's eyes held lingering sadness. Junior looked nervous about his future, and Lottie had blinked just as the flash went off. But those imperfections made it real, made it theirs. Beau stood before the photograph, Lottie beside him, holding his hand, and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From a dusty auction platform to this moment of peace and family, what a strange and wonderful path grief had carved. "Tell me the story again," Lottie requested, as she often did. "About how we became a family." So Beau began, his voice warm and reflective, telling the tale that had become their family legend. Once upon a time, in a dust-blown town called Calico Ridge, a wealthy rancher named Beau Thatcher walked into a livestock auction expecting to buy cattle. Instead, he found himself bidding on something far different. A young orphan girl named Lottie, left alone after a devastating fire. As he spoke, Catherine joined them, drawn by the familiar story. They stood together in front of the photograph, the real family complementing the captured image. And Beau felt a completeness he'd thought impossible. Outside, the Montana sun painted the valley in gold and amber. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous, peaceful, full of life and possibility. Old Pete was working with the horses, Maria was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and somewhere beyond the horizon, Junior was building his own future. But here, in this moment, the Thatcher family was together. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole in the ways that mattered. Beau finished the story as he always did. And they realized that sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unexpected places. For Beau Thatcher, that place was a dusty auction in a frontier town. What began as a transaction became a transformation. An orphan found a father found redemption, a family found each other, and a heart frozen by grief learned to love again. And they lived happily ever after, Lottie added. The child's addition to the adult's tale. Not every single day, Beau corrected gently, ruffling her hair. But in all the ways that matter, yes. Happily ever after. Catherine's hand found his, and this time she squeezed back. Lottie hugged them both, and they stood like that, a tableau of healing and hope, of loss and love. A family forged in fire and sealed with faith. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in impossible colors, and the Thatcher ranch settled into evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to treasure or overcome. But tonight they had this, each other, their imperfect family, their hard-won happiness, and it was enough. More than enough, it was everything.